One day, a gate to hell suddenly appeared in the sky. From it emerged terrifying calamities that overwhelmed humanity with unimaginable power. As the monsters rampaged across the world, mankind seemed destined for extinction. But when faced with despair, humanity awakened. People began gaining levels and skills, giving them the power to fight back against the calamities. Since then, the world has changed. A person's value was now determined by their level and abilities. Among all humanity, 10 individuals stood above everyone else. They were praised, respected, and worshipped as the strongest heroes in existence. They were known as the Numbers. The heroes who once saved the world had become humanity's greatest hope. One day, a blonde-haired man announced that the Numbers were searching for people worthy enough to fight alongside them. The announcement was displayed on a massive screen in the middle of the city. A brown-haired boy stopped and looked up at it. He quietly watched the screen as he thought about the Numbers, the heroes who had once saved the world. For a brief moment, he simply stood there and stared at the massive display. His name was Kuya Kamakami. And this guy right here is our main protagonist. Like countless others, Kuya had once been saved by the Numbers. Because of that, he grew up dreaming of joining them someday and protecting people from calamities. That was the dream he held onto as a child. But reality was far crueler. Nearby, one person proudly announced that they had finally reached level 100. Another complained about still being stuck in the level 90s. In a world where strength could be measured so clearly, the strong were respected more than ever. Meanwhile, the weak were looked down upon. And for Kuya, who had been stuck at level 8 for 6 whole years, it felt as if the world itself was telling him that he didn't deserve to exist. In a world where everyone possessed powers, he was the only person who had never awakened. Suddenly, alarms echoed throughout the city. A calamity warning was broadcast everywhere. Some people grumbled because they were busy and found it annoying. Children started crying. Others checked their phones and complained that the detected location was probably wrong again. A little girl cried out for her mother. Her mother immediately pulled her into a hug and reassured her that the Numbers would come and save them. Then suddenly, the space above them cracked open. A monster clawed its way into the city. Panic spread instantly as people ran for their lives. But the mother and daughter froze in fear. The moment Kuya saw them, he turned around and sprinted forward without hesitation. He placed himself between the monster and the 2 civilians as the towering creature loomed over him. His entire body trembled with fear. The monster let out a deafening roar. At that moment, Kuya wished more than anything that he had power. Then, in an instant, a blonde-haired man appeared and kicked the monster away. Kuya's eyes widened in shock. He recognized the man immediately. It was Inui, Seika Inui. One of the Numbers, the man known as the strongest in the world, and the person Kuya admired more than anyone else. 6 years ago, a monster known as a special grade calamity appeared. Even awakened humans were no match for it. Countless people lost their lives. At the time, Kuya was only 11 years old. Covered in blood, he sat helplessly among piles of corpses. Most of what happened that day had become a blur in his memory. But one memory remained crystal clear. The Numbers fought a desperate battle against the calamity with their lives on the line. Inui personally faced the monster in combat, and just when he finally cornered it, the monster noticed something. It saw Kuya, and immediately shifted its attention toward him. That was where Kuya's memory ended. When he regained consciousness, Inui was holding him tightly and assuring him that he was safe now. That was the moment Kuya realized that Inui himself had saved him. A scream suddenly pulled Kuya back to reality. A crowd had gathered around Inui in excitement after recognizing him as one of the Numbers. Kuya stood there completely stunned. Until one of the fangirls shoved him aside. Only then did he realize just how overwhelmingly popular Inui truly was. There were still so many things he wanted to tell him, and chances like this might never come again. Gathering his courage, Kuya tightly gripped his notebook labeled "Things to Do to Become One of the Numbers." Then he called out to Inui. Inui turned around. Kuya nervously asked if he remembered the boy he had saved 6 years ago. He confessed that ever since that day, he had wanted to become as strong as him. He explained that he had tried his hardest all these years, but no matter what he did, his level and skills never improved the way he wanted them to. Desperately, Kuya asked what he needed to do to become one of the numbers. Inui remained silent. Suddenly, one of the fans yelled at Kuya to move already and shoved him onto the ground. Groaning in pain, Kuya slowly sat back up. Then a young girl suddenly called out, "Big brother!" Kuya immediately recognized her. She was the little girl from earlier. Relieved that she was safe, he looked toward her, but she ran straight past him and thanked Inui for saving her instead. Kuya quietly lowered his eyes. Then he slowly stood back up and left, because he still had to go to school. A live news report was being broadcast from Shibuya. The reporter explained that although a calamity warning had appeared during one of the busiest hours of the day, a nearby subjugation team had responded immediately. She proudly announced that Seika Inui of the Numbers had successfully defeated the beast. Praising his swift actions, she declared that peace had once again been protected in Shibuya. Inui stated that the mission of the Numbers was to ensure that the tragedy from 6 years ago would never happen again. He declared that they would continue fighting with their lives on the line to uphold that duty. The reporter asked if he was referring to the special grade Calamity incident, the disaster that caused the highest number of casualties in history. Inui confirmed it. He stated that they had paid a terrible price during that battle and lost many of their fellow numbers. Kuya silently watched the broadcast from the giant screen. Excitedly, the reporter pointed out that Inui was the man who defeated the Calamity and became a living legend. The crowd around him erupted into cheers. Inui looked like he wanted to say something, as if he was about to deny it, but when he saw the smiles and admiration on his fans' faces, he simply smiled back and waved at the crowd instead. Meanwhile, Kuya continued walking toward school. Then suddenly, someone grabbed him from behind. A blonde-haired boy wrapped an arm around Kuya's shoulders while calling him Hachiko. Startled, Kuya immediately recognized him. It was Tanba. Kuya awkwardly stammered Tanba's name. Without warning, one of Tanba's friends kicked Kuya hard in the stomach. The guy shouted that a little pipsqueak like Kuya had no right speaking casually to someone like Tanba. The three bullies looked down on him with mocking smiles. One of Tanba's lackeys proudly explained that Tanba was already considered a candidate for the next generation of the Numbers, a true rising star. He sneered that a pathetic level 8 loser like Hachiko shouldn't be talking to him like they were equals. Tanba casually told them to stop before people misunderstood the situation. Noticing the stares from nearby pedestrians, he explained that they were just classmates. Ryoji Tanba was the same age as Kuya. But unlike him, Tanba was a genius who constantly broke records. The difference between them was overwhelming. Then Tanba casually mentioned that he and the others were thinking about going bowling. Kuya awkwardly replied that he couldn't skip school. The group immediately burst into laughter. They mocked him for thinking he had actually been invited. One of them called him embarrassing. Tanba leaned closer and casually told Kuya to lend him some cash since he was a little short at the moment. Kuya pointed out that Tanba never paid him back, and besides, Tanba came from a rich family anyway. Tanba frowned slightly and said he didn't understand. Then he suddenly shouted that spending Koya's money was the most fun part. He punched Koya in the face and stole his wallet. After seeing the tiny amount of money inside, Tanba clicked his tongue and called him a cheapskate. Once he took the cash, he tossed the empty wallet away and told Kuya he should have handed it over from the beginning. Kuya silently cursed them in his head. Meanwhile, the group walked away while talking about how much money the Numbers probably earned. One of them claimed that reaching the top meant gaining influence equal to a president. Tanba admitted that he desperately wanted to become one of the Numbers because they probably had everything: money, women, and luxury. The moment Kuya heard that, his eyes widened. Quietly, he muttered that they were wrong. The group stopped and turned toward him. Then Kuya suddenly shouted at them that they were wrong. He grabbed Tanba by the shoulders and yelled that the Numbers were not vulgar people like them, so they had no right mocking them. Kuya declared that no matter how talented Tanba was, someone like him could never become one of the Numbers. Naturally, those words pissed Tanba off. Turning toward his friends, Tanba announced that bowling was cancelled. Instead, he decided to teach Kuya a lesson. Inside an abandoned building, the group surrounded Kuya. Tanba punched him and demanded to know who gave him the right to talk back. Then he revealed his level. A status window appeared before Kuya's eyes. It displayed the name Ryoji Tanba, level 2500. Skill: Pocket. Tanba reminded Kuya that he could crush a weakling like him instantly. Then he proudly announced that he would show him his ultimate skill. Pocket. Kouya stared in shock as a giant, dark, fish-like creature materialized behind Tanba. Tanba explained that his skill allowed him to store anything inside his pocket, claim it as his own, and summon it whenever he wanted, even calamities. He brought up Kouya's earlier statement about him never becoming one of the numbers. Then he asked if Kouya could still talk big after seeing this monster. The Calamity immediately charged toward Kouya. The others laughed at him. Tanba mockingly told him to run, otherwise he would get eaten alive. Kouya stumbled and crashed face first onto the ground. The Calamity roared violently before biting directly into his leg. With terrifying force, it slammed him into the ground. A violent explosion of dust and purple energy erupted outward. One of the guys nervously muttered, "Oh, whoopsie." Blood spread across the floor. Kouya looked down in horror at his severed leg. Then he screamed in agony. One of the bullies panicked and asked if Kouya was seriously about to die. Tanba calmly replied that if the thorium or they called an ambulance now, someone with a healing skill could still save him. He suggested pretending they had simply discovered a weak civilian being attacked by a Calamity. After all, saving Kouya would probably improve his reputation even more. Standing over Kouya's broken body, Tanba mockingly asked if he wanted to be saved. Then he offered him a deal. He said he would save Kouya, only if Kouya agreed to become his dog for the rest of his life. Kouya could do nothing but lie there helplessly, while Tanba continued calling him worthless. Tears formed in Kouya's eyes as he wondered why this was happening to him. Then Tanba accidentally stepped on something. It was Kouya's notebook. He picked it up and showed it to the others. Reading through it, he found a note that said, "Do 300 push-ups and sit-ups every day." Tanba laughed and called Kouya a desperate, try hard. The others mocked how hard Kouya worked, despite never increasing his level even once. Tanba sneered that being useless must really suck. Then he told Kouya to accept reality already. Tanba declared that someone without skills or levels could never become one of the numbers. And once again, he called Kouya worthless. Tears streamed down Kouya's face. He could not understand why this was happening to him, why people like Tanba were blessed with power, while he had absolutely nothing. His body slowly grew colder. He wondered if this was really where he was going to die. And faced with such a miserable ending, Kouya quietly wondered what the point of his life had even been. Suddenly, a towering figure made of blazing red flames appeared behind the group. It declared that all of this was foolish. Kouya stared blankly at it. His vision was blurry. Then he noticed something strange. The world around him had completely stopped moving. For a moment, Kouya wondered if he had already died. The voice sounded disgusted. It could not believe a human would actually die from something so pathetic. Kouya weakly asked, who was there? The flaming entity introduced itself as Mugen. Then it asked Kouya if he had forgotten what happened 6 years ago. Kouya's eyes widened in shock, because this monster was the very same special-grade Calamity that Inui supposedly defeated back then. Mugen scoffed at the idea. It corrected Kouya and revealed the truth. It had never been defeated at all. Instead, it had been living inside Kouya this entire time. Kouya could not understand what it meant. Mugen explained that 6 years ago, after exhausting nearly all of its energy, it attempted to possess the body of the brat nearby. That brat had been Kouya. But instead of taking over his body, Mugen itself ended up being absorbed into Kouya instead. Mugen complained that watching Kouya's pathetic insect-like life for 6 straight years had been unbearably boring. It spent all that time asleep, unable to even take control of his body. Only now, after Kouya had nearly died, was it finally able to emerge again. Mugen coldly told Kouya that he was going to die. Pain covered Kouya's face. Mugen mocked his miserable life. Nobody acknowledged him. Nobody expected anything from him. Everyone treated him like an insect. Then Mugen asked Kouya if he knew why. It declared that it was because Kouya was weak. Kouya gritted his teeth in frustration. Mugen asked if power was truly what Kouya desired. Then, as a final gift before death, it offered him a taste of power so he could at least die satisfied. But Kouya rejected that idea, because the power he truly wanted was power he could use to protect others, just like how Inui protected him back then. That was the kind of strength he had always admired. That was the power he truly wanted. Suddenly, Kouya's eyes glowed bright red. Violent energy began swirling around him. A terrifying force exploded from his body. Tanba and the others froze in shock. Then suddenly, the Calamity Tanba had summoned collapsed, dead on the spot. Koya's body slowly rose back to its feet, but it was no longer Koya controlling it. Mugen had taken over, and Mugen laughed with satisfaction after finally obtaining a human body again. Then it asked Kuya something. Had he ever wondered why his level never increased no matter how hard he trained? Mugen raised a fist and shattered Koya's status screen with a single punch. The broken screen cracked apart like glass. Then Mugen revealed the truth. Koya's status had been facing the wrong direction this entire time. An infinity symbol suddenly glowed brightly above Koya's body. Sinister red energy crackled violently around him as overwhelming power burst outward. Mugen truly reveled in the sensation of possessing a human body once again. Tanba wondered what exactly was wrong with Kuya. One of his lackeys questioned whether Kuya was somehow still alive because his life force resembled that of a cockroach. Mugen casually commented that just as he expected, they were weak. Cracking his claw-like fingers, he activated his skill. The two lackeys burst into laughter because they assumed he had completely lost his mind. However, Tanba remained deadly serious. Mugen told those small fries to do their absolute best not to die instantly. Meanwhile, inside a high-rise building within the city, someone announced that he had returned. Seika Inui stepped into his office. His secretary welcomed him back and reported that there had been 0 casualties, just as expected. Inui agreed and remarked that it was fortunate the Calamity had appeared nearby. He reflected on how unpredictable Calamity threats could be and emphasized that they always needed to remain vigilant. Then Kuya suddenly crossed his mind. His secretary asked whether something was wrong. Inui shared that a kid had spoken to him earlier, and he eventually realized that it was the same child he had saved during the Calamity incident 6 years ago. He admitted that he had done something terrible. He regretted not recognizing Koya sooner. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure filled the room. Inui immediately asked what that presence was. Then he looked out the window. He could feel that the power outside was equal to theirs, or possibly even stronger. In complete disbelief, he wondered whether it was Calamity-class power. Back at the abandoned building, one of Tanba's friends was becoming increasingly irritated with Koya. He felt deeply offended after being called a small fry. The man immediately charged toward him. He swore that he would kill Kuya himself. However, the blazing energy gathered in his hand suddenly dispersed before it could even touch Koya. Then Kuya twisted the man's arm so violently that the bones shattered instantly. When the man collapsed onto the floor, his body was grotesquely twisted, as though someone had wrung him out like a towel. Lost in a manic state, Mugen declared that the feeling of crushing bones was absolutely irresistible. He added that it had already been 6 years since he last experienced it. Sweat dripped down Tanba's face as he questioned whether the person standing before him was really Koya anymore. Meanwhile, the other lackey remained arrogant. So he gathered his energy and attacked while shouting that Kuya was still the truly useless one. He unleashed a technique called Wig Whip, sending thorn-covered glowing green vines lashing violently toward Koya. The vines wrapped tightly around Koya's body. The man believed he had successfully captured him, so he became completely confused when the vines suddenly disappeared and Koya effortlessly sidestepped away. Then Koya raised his fingers. With a simple flick to the man's forehead, he launched him away while blood sprayed through the air. The impact sent the man flying backward violently as blood burst everywhere. Mugen casually declared that all of this was boring. He wanted something far more exciting instead. Suddenly, Mugen sensed something approaching. A wide grin slowly spread across his face after realizing that a big one had finally arrived. Tanba immediately activated his technique Pocket. Purple portals of energy opened all around him. Tanba shouted at Kuya not to get carried away and cursed him as a bastard. Then he unleashed countless daggers toward him at incredible speed. However, Mugen looked disappointed. He effortlessly shattered every projectile as he realized that the presence he sensed was not Tanba at all. Tanba stared in complete shock. Then, in a single instant, a powerful strike slammed directly into him. His body crashed violently into the wall. Several of his teeth flew out before he completely lost consciousness. Mugen continued staring ahead, clearly expecting someone else to arrive. Standing before him was a Calamity with writhing tentacles covering its face. Mugen grinned. He asked whether it had come to celebrate his revival before mockingly calling it Big Guy. Mugen already knew that this weak Calamity did not possess a will of its own, so he wondered whether it had simply been drawn there by sensing his power. Meanwhile, Tanba stared at the scene in complete confusion while blood dripped from his nose. He could not believe that just as Kuya suddenly became monstrously strong, another terrifying calamity had appeared as well. At that point, he genuinely wondered whether he was dreaming. Mugen became excited and declared that it was finally time for some warm-up exercises. Inside his own mind, Koya questioned what exactly that power was. He slowly stared down at his own hands. Then he wondered whether he was even truly alive anymore, because only moments earlier, his body had felt freezing cold. Mugen stood before the gigantic calamity and casually asked the kid whether he was still alive. With a sinister smirk spreading across his face, he asked Kuya once again if he was truly alive. Then Mugen slowly began walking forward while continuing to converse with him. A wicked smile appeared across his face as he told Kuya to enjoy the show from the best seat in the house. Power surged violently through his body, causing the ground itself to crack apart beneath him. Kuya questioned what Mugen meant and demanded to know what exactly he planned to do. Standing directly before the massive, tentacled calamity, Mugen declared that his intentions should already be obvious. Then he brought up the burning incident from 6 years ago. Kuya suddenly remembered the horrifying sight of Mugen standing amidst a ruined city, while corpses covered the streets everywhere. Horrified, Kuya wondered whether that nightmare was about to happen all over again. Mugen declared that he would kill the calamity first, and after that, he would resume slaughtering the humans. However, something suddenly made his eyes widen in surprise. Just thinking about the disaster from 6 years ago continuing once again, there was no way Kuya would allow that to happen. He desperately demanded his body back. Suddenly, violent energy surged throughout the body, and Kuya screamed in agony. Mugen roared furiously while demanding to know what Kuya had done. Without wasting another second, Kuya forcefully reclaimed control of his body. Mugen stood there completely dumbfounded. Meanwhile, Kuya himself could barely believe that he had actually returned. The giant calamity loomed directly above him as Mugen demanded to know what exactly he had done. Mugen warned him that he was going to die. He added that if Kuya wanted to avoid that fate, then he needed to switch places with him again immediately. At that exact instant, the calamity's attack nearly struck him. Barely managing to dodge, Kuya looked upward in confusion. Then he noticed a blade already lodged deep inside the calamity's body, so he immediately rushed forward and drove it in even further. The giant tentacles attacked relentlessly from every direction, but Kuya moved at incredible speed while dodging every single strike. Mugen scoffed after realizing that Kuya was not only controlling the body again, but was also using Mugen's power at the same time. Kuya could feel his body moving almost on instinct. At the same time, the calamity's attack suddenly looked unbelievably slow to him. Then, with a powerful punch, Kuya slammed his fist directly into the giant creature. At that moment, he realized that he could actually do this. Until one of the tentacles suddenly wrapped around his leg. Caught completely off guard, Kuya was instantly yanked away. The calamity held him upside down in the air, while its glowing yellow eyes stared directly at him. Struggling desperately, Kuya told himself to stay focused. He forced himself to feel the power flowing through him. Then, a status window suddenly appeared before his eyes, revealing his skill, Unrestricted Awakening. At the same time, his level changed from 8 into an infinity symbol. While suspended in mid-air, Kuya began channeling that overwhelming power. Suddenly, beams of light erupted from inside the calamity's body itself. A massive explosion erupted outward. The blast destroyed most of the building. When everything settled, Kuya stood amidst the remains of the defeated calamity. Nearby, Tanba groaned painfully while lying across piles of broken debris. Kuya could not believe that the entire building had practically been blown apart. Meanwhile, Mugen wondered what exactly was wrong with him. That moment marked Kuya's true encounter with Mugen, and that encounter would eventually invite countless future battles into his life. At the time, however, Kuya had absolutely no idea about any of that. Elsewhere, a young man calmly sat atop the head of a gigantic slain beast while quietly muttering that everything was boring. The morning news reported that a calamity had appeared inside an abandoned building within the city the previous day. The broadcast explained that the Metropolitan Police and the Calamity Countermeasures headquarters were currently investigating the incident. It was also announced that the numbers themselves would participate in the investigation. Meanwhile, huge crowds had already gathered near the scene in hopes of catching a glimpse of the numbers. Watching the news from inside his room, Kuya muttered that things had turned into a massive mess. He remembered everything that happened the day before. He had caused the Calamity to explode and practically destroyed the entire building in the process. Kuya slowly inspected his hand. Then he checked his status window. His level had returned to level 8, yet his body no longer felt completely like his own. It felt as though overwhelming power was constantly overflowing inside him. Suddenly, Kayano noticed his reflection in the mirror and froze in shock. There were now red highlights mixed into his hair. He looked like some delinquent and immediately complained that he hated it. At that moment, he realized that everything that happened yesterday had truly been real. Then his eyes landed on the massive scar across his leg, causing his face to instantly turn pale. At that exact moment, Mugen's voice echoed in his mind, telling him that if he wanted to keep dreaming, then he should simply go back to sleep already. Suddenly, dark energy began swirling all around Koya. Confused, he looked around and asked where exactly he was. Mugen coldly called him insolent. Then he declared that Koya now stood before the Great Lord Mugen himself. Mugen remarked that it was unbelievable for a mere human to interfere with him and stated that Koya should consider it an honor. Koya glared directly at him. After all, this was the special grade Calamity Mugen, the same monster who plunged the world into terror 6 years ago. Koya scolded him for doing whatever he wanted inside a human body. Since Mugen was supposed to be a Calamity, Kuya demanded to know why he was doing something like this in the first place. Mugen only grinned in response, then he repeated the question while releasing black mist toward Kuya. Memories of people screaming and desperately fleeing through chaos suddenly resurfaced. Amidst the collapsing rubble and destruction, Mugen stood tall like a nightmare itself. Kuya's eyes widened in horror. He collapsed onto his knees while breathing heavily. As Mugen's thoughts poured directly into his mind, Kuya realized something terrifying. Mugen only understood destruction, slaughter, and an endless urge to consume absolutely everything. Even so, Koya declared that he would never allow Mugen to do whatever he wanted. He challenged Mugen directly and pointed out that Mugen could not even leave his body anyway. Mugen admitted that Koya was correct. He himself did not understand how he had become trapped inside someone like Koya. Then a massive grin slowly spread across Mugen's face. He warned Koya that once he died, the body would fully become his. Kuya stared back at him with determination while dark energy endlessly swirled around them. Chuckling to himself, Mugen remarked that the day was not far away anymore. Kuya immediately demanded to know what he meant by that. Mugen asked why Kuya thought the giant Calamity from yesterday had appeared in the first place. He revealed that calamities were naturally flocking toward Kuya like moths drawn toward a flame. Mugen described a future filled with endless screams, chaos, and destruction. According to him, the world itself would eventually become a living hell. Kuya realized that calamities were now gathering around him. Mugen casually stated that the weak calamities from before posed no challenge for him at all. However, sooner or later, Kuya would inevitably be killed by one of them. Mugen eagerly looked forward to the day he could finally take complete control over Kuya's body, but until that day arrived, Kuya would have no choice but to continue fighting alone. Later, a train sped through a dark tunnel. Kuya sat quietly inside one of the train cars while thinking about how he was supposed to keep fighting. He knew there was no way he could continue relying on the power of a calamity forever. Still, he also understood that this was not a problem he could solve alone anymore. This was no longer just his personal issue. It had become a threat to all of humanity itself, and in Koya's mind, there was only one person capable of solving something like this. Seika Inui. Koya pinned the location of the numbers association on his phone. He felt certain that if he honestly explained everything, Inui would help him. Eventually, he got off the train at the Numbers Association station. The moment Kuya stepped onto the platform, a group of delinquents immediately noticed him and started calling him Hachiko. They mocked him while asking what a worthless dog like him was doing there. Kuya remained silent. One of the bullies remarked that Kuya was acting pretty cold toward them now. Another suggested that they should all have a little fun together instead. Koya quickly apologized and explained that he was in a hurry. He politely asked whether they could do this another time instead. One of the delinquents scoffed and remarked that Tanba's little pet was suddenly talking awfully boldly. The leader declared that they needed to teach Koya a lesson for Tanba's sake. Throwing a heavy punch toward him, the man ordered Koya to quietly wag his tail like usual. Koya instinctively braced himself. However, when he felt absolutely nothing hit him, he slowly opened his eyes in confusion. Suddenly, the man screamed in agony while clutching his arm. The others immediately rushed toward Koya while demanding to know what he had just done. Koya panicked and stammered for them to stop. Instinctively, Koya thrust both of his hands forward, and one of the men was suddenly blasted directly onto the train tracks. Koya hurriedly apologized while asking whether he was all right, but out of nowhere, a calamity suddenly appeared beside the man on the tracks. It resembled a gigantic worm lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. The man froze in terror after realizing that a calamity had appeared. Meanwhile, Kuya immediately realized that Mugen had been telling the truth. The calamities really were gathering around him. The creature lunged toward the man, forcing Koya to dive in and save him. The calamity's massive body slammed both of them back onto the platform. Kuya stared in disbelief at what he had just done. He wondered whether that had really been him moving just now. The calamity loomed menacingly above them. Kuya desperately wondered what he was supposed to do now. He honestly doubted whether he could even fight something like that. Nearby, a woman suddenly screamed in terror. There were even more calamities appearing throughout the station. At that moment, Mugen's words echoed throughout Koya's mind. And Koya immediately blamed himself for all of it. In his imagination, he saw humans being devoured by calamities all around him. He wondered what he was supposed to do anymore. All his life, he had wanted to save people, yet reality kept turning out to be the complete opposite. Then determination suddenly filled his eyes. It did not matter whether the power came from a calamity anymore. A worthless Hachiko like him could not afford to be picky. Whether it was power, granted by heaven, or power stolen from a calamity, Kaya chose to use it. He let out a loud scream as he activated that power. A status window appeared before him, displaying his skill. Infinite Awakening. His level no longer showed a number, and instead displayed an infinity symbol. This was his power now. Kuya charged forward. Then he threw a devastating punch toward the calamity that was about to devour the terrified woman. The woman stared at him in complete shock. Kuya had already made up his mind. If Mugen intended to take over his body, then he would simply use Mugen's power for himself instead. He continued punching through the calamities one after another. People watched in disbelief as the monsters' bodies were blown apart in midair. Meanwhile, Mugen noticed that Koya had successfully drawn out his power once again. Eventually, the overwhelming energy finally settled down. The woman tearfully thanked Koya for saving everyone. More survivors soon gathered around him, praising his strength while repeatedly thanking him over and over. Someone even shouted that Koya looked just like one of the numbers themselves. Meanwhile, the two delinquents remained frozen on the ground in complete shock. However, Koya himself remained deep in thought. He remembered being mocked his entire life as a worthless Hachiko. And now, he was determined to leave that identity behind forever. Most importantly, he was determined not to let Mugen take control of him. At the same time, inside a hospital within the city, Tanba repeatedly muttered the name Hachiko. Tanba gritted his teeth and swore that he would never forgive him. A nurse entered the room and informed him that he had a visitor. Annoyed, Tanba screamed at her, reminding her that he had already said not to let anyone inside. Inui immediately scolded him for speaking so rudely to someone taking care of him. Tanba replied that he was not impressed. However, the moment he heard Inui's voice, Tanba froze. He was shocked to see him and instantly became polite. Inui asked whether his injuries were all right after surviving such a disaster. He casually remarked that surviving a high-class calamity might actually make Tanba a lucky person. The woman standing beside Inui casually chewed gum, while Tanba recognized her as another member of the numbers. He wondered why such important people had suddenly come to visit him. Inui explained that they were currently investigating the person responsible for defeating the calamity. He told Tanba to speak up if he knew anything. Tanba froze the moment he heard the word defeated. It instantly reminded him of the way Kuya fought back then, and it made him furious. Tanba shouted at them to stop messing with him. He insisted that he was the one who killed the calamity. Then he desperately demanded that Inui allow him to join the numbers. Deep down, however, he refused to admit that Kuya had actually saved him. Instead, he kept convincing himself that he was the superior one. The woman's eyes faintly glowed as she casually popped her gum. Inui immediately noticed it. After a brief pause, Inui simply replied that he understood. Then, with a gentle smile, he told Tanba to focus on recovering first. He turned around to leave, but Tanba immediately sat up and shouted for them to wait. Desperately, he begged them not to leave and once again pleaded to be accepted into the numbers. Meanwhile, Inui and the woman walked through the hallway while talking about how Tanba was a complete dud. She remarked that he was trying way too hard to act tough when she could crush him effortlessly. Inui told her not to say that because Tanba was considered a rising star. She looked shocked after hearing that and commented that the world must truly be ending. Then, he brought up the other survivor. He hoped their teammate was having better luck there. The woman asked who had been sent to meet the other survivor. He replied that it was the fast-rising number 13. She looked surprised and even questioned whether that was really a good idea. Inui explained that if the opponent truly possessed a special grade ability, then they would need a ranker of an equal level to deal with them. Otherwise, the survivor would be completely overwhelmed. They were talking about a genius who was destined to become the strongest. It was Kei Kusanagi. The massive skyscraper stood at the very center of the city. Koya stared at it in complete awe the moment he saw it. It was the Numbers Association. Information regarding calamities from all across Japan was gathered there, while rankers from every region constantly visited the building. Rankers were warriors who made their living by subjugating calamities. This was also the headquarters of the Numbers, the 10 pillars who stood above all rankers, which meant that Inui, the strongest man alive, was inside this very place as well. Koya needed a way to deal with the approaching calamities, yet he still had no countermeasure against Mugen, the calamity living inside him. If Mugen ever completely took over his body, then Kuya would need someone capable of killing both him and Mugen together, and he believed that Inui was the only person who could accomplish that. With that determination in mind, Kuya stepped inside the building. A group of receptionists with completely identical faces greeted him and politely asked how they could help him. Caught off guard, Kuya wondered whether it was some kind of special ability or if they were actually clones. As he approached the counter, he requested a meeting with Inui. The receptionist politely informed him that Inui was currently away and asked whether he had an appointment. Kuya admitted that he did not. He explained that he simply hoped to somehow meet him directly. The receptionist then asked for his name and age. He introduced himself as Koya Kamikami, 17 years old. The receptionist looked surprised because it appeared that he did not have a skill registration on file. She pointed out that skill registration was mandatory for all awakened individuals. Intentionally avoiding registration would even be considered a crime. Kuya nervously stammered before admitting that his skill had simply never manifested until now. The receptionist finally understood the situation and instructed Koya to register his skill first. She also asked whether he wanted to register as a ranker at the same time. Kuya agreed, though he quickly became confused afterward. The receptionist directed him toward a machine and instructed him to place his hand on it. The machine would analyze his skill, and once that was complete, his registration process would be finished. Kuya immediately wanted to back out, but the receptionist offered to explain what being a ranker actually meant. Inside his mind, Mugen muttered that the place was unbelievably boring. He compared the people around them to grains of rice. At that moment, someone entered the building. It was Kei. A powerful aura surrounded him. Mugen immediately noticed his presence. Meanwhile, the receptionist continued explaining that registered rankers received rankings which changed depending on the calamities they defeated and the directives they completed for the association. She added that the top 10 rankers were known as the Numbers, individuals who possessed both immense honor and enormous wealth. She encouraged Kuya to work hard and someday become one of them. Then she began explaining several important rules. First, private disputes between rankers involving skills were strictly forbidden and would result in severe punishment. Kuya felt completely overwhelmed. He had only come there to ask for help regarding Mugen. Yet somehow he had suddenly become a ranker himself. He quickly snapped back to reality and reminded himself that this was not the time to feel happy about it. He wondered whether this was really okay since the process might expose Mugen's existence. Then the machine announced that the registration had been completed. The receptionist congratulated him on officially becoming a ranker. Kuya quietly sighed in relief. Then the receptionist showed him the results of his skill and rank evaluation. She found something strange. Kuya was registered as level 8, yet there was no skill listed under his profile at all. Secretly, Kuya felt relieved. Because if the machine had displayed something like Calamity or Mugen, then things would have instantly become a disaster. The receptionist informed him that they would need to investigate the issue further. Kuya quickly told her that it was completely fine. Suddenly, Kei appeared behind him and asked whether he was Koya Kamikami. Caught off guard, Koya turned around and wondered who exactly this person was. Blue energy gleamed inside Kei's eyes. He declared that he had high expectations for Koaya. In the very next instant, an overwhelming burst of blue energy exploded outward. The attack tore straight through the table while the receptionist stumbled backward in shock. Koaya instantly evaded the strike and reappeared behind Kei. Kei looked amused by his reaction. Meanwhile, Kuya was irritated. He could not believe that the floor itself had been gouged apart. He demanded to know what Kei thought he was doing. Kei simply wondered whether Kuya was truly the one. Everyone became tense. The commotion quickly gathered a crowd as people wondered whether a fight between rankers was about to break out. A group of receptionists immediately rushed over and warned them that duels between rankers were strictly forbidden. They ordered the two not to fight inside the association. Kei glared at them. The receptionist hid behind the counter while yelling that they would both be subjected to punishment if they continued. Meanwhile, Kuya simply observed Kei carefully. Sweat slowly rolled down his cheek. Kei noticed that Kuya had managed to dodge that attack, and because of that, he suspected that Kuya might actually be the real deal. Some people immediately recognized rank 13, Kei. However, those who did not know him asked whether he was famous. Another person replied that Kei was basically a complete weirdo. They described him as a battle maniac who constantly searched for strong opponents. Suddenly, the man warned everyone nearby to stay away before they got caught in the crossfire. Kuya confronted Kei and demanded to know what exactly he thought he was doing. He pointed out how dangerous those actions were. Kei looked amused by his reaction, especially after hearing that Kuya was supposedly stronger than him. Kuya was completely stunned by that statement. A while earlier, inside a quiet bar, Kei questioned Inui about why he had called him there. Then, he bluntly asked whether Inui had finally decided to fight him. Inui calmly replied that he had not, and explained that he wanted to discuss something else instead. He offered Kei a seat. However, Kei simply replied that he was leaving. Inui then offered him some high-quality milk instead. That immediately stopped Kei from walking away. He turned around, returned to the counter, and began drinking it, while stating that he would leave as soon as he finished. Only then did Inui finally explain that he wanted Kei to make contact with a certain boy. This boy happened to be the person who encountered and survived the Calamity earlier that morning. Kei asked why that mattered. Inui explained that Kei had sensed it too, that the Calamity had been dangerously close to special grade level. Therefore, if that Calamity had truly been repelled, then this boy might actually be stronger than Kei himself. That completely stunned Kei. Inui wanted to know whether the boy shared the same aspirations as them. He added that if Kei did not want to handle it, then he would personally take care of the matter himself. Kei immediately asked whether Inui intended to fight the boy. Inui calmly replied that it would depend on the circumstances. Kei's brows furrowed. He finished the rest of his milk in one go. Then, the moment he emptied the glass, he declared that he would be the one to fight Kei. Inui calmly replied that when the time came, he would accept Kei's challenge. Back in the present moment, Kei checked Koya's status window. He remarked that Koya's stats looked completely bugged. Something about them was obviously not right. Koya felt his skin sting from the pressure alone. Compared to this, even Tanba was nothing. The strength Koya sensed from Kei existed on an entirely different level. Kei remarked that if Koya refused to come to him, then he would simply approach Koya himself. He immediately unleashed another attack, forcing Koya to barely evade it in time. Koya shouted for him to stop because he had absolutely no intention of fighting him. Kei challenged him to try stopping him instead. Koya continued dodging the attacks while desperately wondering what he should do. One thing was certain. If he lost control and got defeated, Mugen would appear. And that was the one outcome he absolutely wanted to avoid. Blue energy gathered within Kei's palm. Then he hurled the attack forward and ordered Kuya to hurry up and reveal his true power already. His arm overflowed with terrifying energy. He was trying to force Kuya into exposing his real strength. Kuya immediately realized how bad the situation had become. He prepared to dodge. But then, he suddenly noticed a child standing directly in the attack's path. His eyes widened in shock. The child was too terrified to even move. Koya yelled at Kei to stop because there was a child there. But Kei showed no intention of stopping, forcing Koya to block the attack with his forearms instead. A massive explosion swallowed the area in blinding light. When the smoke finally cleared, Kei calmly stood amidst the destruction. He remarked that no matter how he looked at it, Koya definitely was not just level 8. Meanwhile, Koya tightly held the child protectively in his arms. He was furious at Kei and demanded to know what his intentions actually were. That kind of power was supposed to defeat calamities and protect people. Kei immediately replied that it was not. He revealed that he simply fought because it was fun. To him, it made no difference whether the opponent was a human or a calamity. All he cared about was testing the limits of his own strength. Infuriated, Kuya shouted for him to stop messing around. He declared that someone who used power so arrogantly was no different from a calamity himself. Kei taunted Koya by suggesting that he try defeating him if he truly believed that. Blue energy condensed into a sphere directly in front of Kei. He expected Koya to rush toward him. Kuya suddenly became confused when Kei appeared far closer than expected for the attack. A punch nearly slammed into him. Kuya wondered if Kei had just teleported. Then, Koya noticed Kei's stance. He realized Kei was about to charge once again. Suddenly, Kei closed the distance so quickly that Koya could barely dodge in time. He realized that his body itself was being forcibly dragged toward Kei. Then Kei delivered a powerful kick. Mugen immediately realized what was happening and found the entire situation amusing. Mugen encouraged Kuya to hurry up and die already so he could finally take over the body completely. Desperate, Koya poured all his strength into his fist and launched a counterattack. At the same time, Kei clenched his fist as blue energy gathered around it. Koya was caught completely off guard. Instead of being pulled toward Kei this time, his body was suddenly pushed away with violent force, causing him to slam hard into a wall. Kei raised the orb of energy resting on his palm before leaping into the air. Then he hurled it directly toward Koya. Koya barely managed to dodge before appearing behind Kei. Kei questioned why Koya kept pretending to hold back. However, when he turned around, he immediately noticed something different. Kuya now wore an extremely serious expression. He suddenly rushed forward. Kuya realized that Kei's ability allowed him to manipulate his movements while firing off devastating energy blasts. He still had no idea what kind of skill it actually was. However, he noticed one important detail. Every time Kei clenched his hand, Kuya's body was forcibly moved. Because of that realization, Kuya chose to engage him in close combat instead. He threw a punch directly at Kei. Bursts of energy exploded around their fists as the two continuously exchanged blows. Kei remarked that everything Kuya did was unbelievably boring. Then he punched Kuya directly in the jaw. A second later, he struck him from the opposite side. He grabbed Kuya by the shirt and began punching him repeatedly without stopping. Kuya could feel just how monstrously strong Kei truly was, and he quickly realized that he could never win in a pure fist fight against him, but even then he could still speak. He shared that he had always been known as the useless Hachiko, but now he was finally going to show everyone the person he had become. He could fight now, and for the first time in his life, he believed he actually had a chance. He threw another punch toward Kei, but Kei easily caught his fist and told him that he had absolutely zero chance of winning. With his other hand, Kei condensed an overwhelming amount of power. Kuya instantly realized how bad the situation was. Then the attack slammed directly into his stomach. A blinding light consumed the entire area. Afterward, Kei sighed in disappointment. He complained that the entire experience had been terrible. He muttered that Inui had tricked him because the fight was not fun at all. Suddenly, however, Kei sensed an energy that immediately made him stop walking away. Dark energy began pouring out from Koya's body. Mugen had regained control the moment Kuya lost consciousness. Kei stood there stunned. Mugen looked at him and declared that he expected Kei to entertain him properly. Then Mugen warned the mushroom head to brace himself. Mugen laughed loudly. He was thrilled now that it was finally his turn to play. Kei looked confused. He wondered if Koya had become a completely different person. Even though the appearance was mostly the same, Kei could tell that the being standing before him was no longer acting human at all. It felt like an entirely different creature had taken over. Mugen suddenly lunged forward. Kei's eyes widened in shock when a slash tore across his body and blood sprayed into the air. For a brief moment, he genuinely thought he had been killed. He dropped to one knee while clutching his side as Mugen slowly loomed over him. Mugen remarked that he had originally aimed for Kei's head, but Kei barely managed to dodge at the last possible moment. Then, he asked whether Kei could still fight because he could smell the exact same thing coming from him. Joy. A crazed smile slowly spread across Kei's face. Kei suddenly leaped upward and launched another attack. Mugen declared that he had already figured out the secret behind Kei's ability. He guessed that it involved compression, such as compressing either space itself or matter. Kei confirmed that Mugen was correct. Energy condensed within Kei's palm once more. Kei warned him that if the attack landed, calling it painful would not even come close to describing the damage. The two clashed head-on as their powers collided in a blinding explosion of energy. Mugen found it genuinely interesting, remarking that ordinary calamities did not possess abilities like this. Kei was suddenly caught off guard. Mugen's punch slammed directly into his face. The impact was so overwhelming that when Kei crashed into the ground, the earth itself caved inward. Mugen declared that skills meant absolutely nothing in the face of overwhelming power. He mocked Kei by saying that even if a mouse grew horns, a tiger would never flinch because of it. Even while lying on the ground, Kei gathered his power once more and hurled it at Mugen. Mugen's arm was instantly severed. Mugen casually commented that Kuya's body truly had belonged to a weak little mouse. Then his arm regenerated. However, the restored arm now looked monstrous and inhuman. Kei stared in shock. Witnessing that level of regeneration made him question whether Kuya was even human anymore. Mugen suddenly grabbed Kei by the shirt. Then he lifted him straight into the air. A violent burst of force erupted as Mugen slammed Kei brutally into the ground. Kei lay within the rubble and admitted that Mugen was strong. Then he activated his ability, Sanctuary, Absolute Territory. A blinding wave of energy flooded the entire area as he unleashed Absolute Territory. Floating within the overwhelming light, Kei spread his arms and remarked that this situation had finally become fun. A grin immediately spread across Mugen's face as he declared that he would push things even further. The two stared each other down while anticipating the next attack. The crowd watched in complete terror. Meanwhile, the receptionist desperately begged them to stop fighting already. Suddenly, another figure appeared. The moment the receptionist saw that person, she immediately stopped crying. At the exact instant, Kei and Mugen clashed once again. A massive explosion erupted throughout the area. Eventually, the smoke began to settle. Inui was revealed standing directly between the two fighters, blocking both of their attacks with his own energy while forcibly separating them apart. Inui demanded to know what exactly they thought they were doing. Both Kei and Mugen were left stunned. Inui stood there calmly while several powerful rankers lined up behind him. Every single one of them wore a stern expression. Kei told Inui not to interfere. A woman standing behind Inui pointed a needle-like weapon directly toward Kei and questioned whether someone in his condition should really still be moving around. Kei's sharp gaze shifted toward her. She simply glared right back at him without fear. Inui firmly told Kei that enough was enough. He warned him that if he kept whining, then he would not get off lightly either. Behind Inui, the rankers were already prepared to draw their weapons at any moment. Mugen commented that Mr. Nice Guy had finally shown up and remarked that it had been a long time. He casually stated that the kid had not been enough to entertain him. Then he told Inui that they should finally settle the fight from 6 years ago. He even added that he did not care if all of them decided to jump him together. Mugen was getting completely fired up. But suddenly, he clicked his tongue in annoyance. He complained that the body was unbelievably frustrating to use. At that moment, Kuya realized that he had regained control again. His body nearly collapsed to the floor, but Inui caught him before he could hit the ground. Inui quietly looked at Koya and remembered that he was the same boy who had once asked how he could become one of the numbers. Then realization finally sank in. Inui carried Kuya in his arms. However, someone suddenly told him to wait. Kei declared that the boy was his prey and that he had no intention of handing him over. Inui calmly told him to move aside. He explained that the numbers would later decide Koya's fate, along with Kei's punishment as well. Kei looked confused by that statement. Inui explained that he had only wanted to confirm whether Koya was truly on their side, yet somehow the situation had turned into a complete disaster instead. He declared that this was a severe violation of regulations and warned Kei that he would also be held responsible. Kei dismissively replied that those rules only existed because they were convenient for people like Inui. Inui responded that Kei should hurry up and stand on the side, powerful enough to force its own convenience onto others. With that, Inui turned around and walked away. Kuya slowly regained consciousness. He asked where he was. To his surprise, he found himself strapped into a metal chair, both his hands and neck tightly locked in place. Inui stood before him and calmly stated, "So, you've finally woken up." Koya managed a small smile when he saw him. Inui continued, explaining that Koya had engaged in an unauthorized duel between rankers, causing massive destruction to nearby structures and even resulting in casualties. As a result, Inui declared that Kuya was being sentenced to death by execution. Kuya's eyes widened in shock and fear. At the Numbers Association headquarters, Kuya Kamikami sat restrained in a chair. He was completely shocked. A grim, reaper-like figure appeared before him. Inui coldly announced that Kuya's execution would now begin and ordered Kurusu to carry out the sentence. Koya was left speechless. The man wearing glasses calmly told Koya not to resent him because he was merely following orders. Koya desperately thought that they absolutely could not do this because of Mugen living inside him. He pleaded for Inui to listen and shouted that they absolutely could not execute him. He tried to explain that if he died, the calamity sealed within him would be unleashed. However, before he could even finish speaking, a slash suddenly cut through the air. The chains restraining Koya were instantly severed and crashed onto the floor. Koya stared in confusion. Inui had already confirmed the truth himself. He apologized for being rough with Koya, explaining that he needed Koya to personally admit the truth before he could properly prove it. Koya tried to say something. However, Inui interrupted him and spoke toward the CCTV cameras instead, asking whether they had all seen enough. He explained that Koya's violent rampages up until now had all been caused by the calamity living inside him. Then he asked whether they still intended to continue with the execution. A government official speaking through the camera stated that they would leave the matter entirely in Inui's hands. However, if another incident happened, Inui himself would be held responsible. Inui calmly replied that he was fine with that because taking responsibility was the duty of adults. Then he casually remarked that some adults seemed extremely eager to avoid responsibility altogether. The official reminded him that the government was providing the Numbers Association with an enormous budget and ordered them to quickly create a world free from calamities. Inui simply acknowledged the order with a respectful bow. Once the meeting ended, Kurusu prepared to leave the room. Inui quietly noticed him. Kuya finally realized that the man was Akikyo Kurusu, the number 2 ranker among the numbers. Kurusu stated that he was a very busy person. Kuya then noticed the girl beside them casually blowing bubblegum and realized that she was Mitsumi Shinomai, the number 10 ranker among the numbers. He was amazed that there were actually 3 members of the numbers gathered inside the same room. Kurusu remarked that even the smallest uncertainty should always be eliminated. He firmly expressed his belief that the boy should still be executed. With that, he quietly closed the door behind him. Mitsumi clicked her tongue and complained that Kurusu was way too full of himself. Inui defended him by pointing out that Kurusu still played along with his little act and even used his skills to help him. That was why he actually liked him. He thanked Mitsumi for staying, but she immediately announced that she was leaving too. Afterward, Inui turned his attention toward Kuya Kamikami. Inui remarked that this was already the 3rd time he had saved Kuya. He apologized for not recognizing him earlier. Kuya was stunned that Inui actually remembered him. Kuya then asked how Inui had figured out that there was a calamity living inside him. Inui claimed that he simply had a very good sense of smell, and Kuya carried the scent of a calamity. Kuya looked shocked by that answer. Inui also brought up the drastic changes in Kuya's appearance and personality. He stated that it was obviously not happening through Kuya's own will, and he also could not believe it was merely some kind of skill. On top of that, when Inui met Koya the day before, he had not smelled like a calamity at all. And Koya also just happened to be present at the abandoned building in Shibuya when the calamity first appeared. Taking all those details into consideration, Inui concluded that a calamity was somehow interfering with Kuya, although he admitted that he had only been half convinced because the situation itself was completely unprecedented. Then, he asked Koya to tell him everything. He promised Koya that he was on his side. Hearing those words made warmth spread through Koya's chest. Tears welled up in his eyes. After everything that had happened, he was relieved to finally meet the Inui he had admired all this time. He was genuinely glad that he had come there. Kuya confessed that a calamity truly resided inside him. He explained that earlier that day, he had been attacked by one inside the subway. Afterward, more calamities began gathering around him. Inui mentioned hearing that Kuya had wiped them all out. Kuya admitted that he seemed capable of using a portion of the calamity's power. Then, Kuya remembered the important thing he originally wanted to tell him. He was just about to confess it when a menacing creature suddenly burst into the room. A man wearing a fur coat appeared. He greeted Inui before questioning when exactly the city had become some kind of gathering place for calamities. He casually mentioned that he had already killed 3 of them on his way there. Then he pointed out that the room itself also reeked of calamity. His gaze immediately landed on Koya, and instantly he knew Koya was the one. In the very next heartbeat, he launched an attack at Koya. Koya immediately vomited onto the ground from the impact. Inui became concerned for him. He demanded to know what Teiyo thought he was doing. Inui told him to look carefully again, because Koya was still human. Koya recognized the man immediately. It was Teiyo Sumeragi, the 4th of the numbers. Teiyo quickly realized that Koya was the so-called Calamity brat who had supposedly been sentenced to death. He questioned why the boy was still alive. Inui calmly replied that they had decided to spare him. Teiyo immediately asked whether this was just another one of Inui's unilateral decisions. He pointed out that important matters like this were supposed to be discussed among all the numbers together. Inui corrected him and clarified that the assembled numbers had already reached a decision. He added that if they waited around for unreliable people like Teiyo, then nothing would ever get decided at all. He even admitted that he was honestly surprised Teiyo had bothered to show up in the first place. Teiyo took those words as permission to voice his opinion. He immediately declared a death sentence for the brat who reeked of calamity. Then he charged forward again, while announcing that the execution would happen right there and then. Kuya watched as Teiyo charged straight toward him. The attack triggered a massive explosion. Kuya simply braced himself for impact. However, when he slowly opened his eyes again, he was shocked to see Teiyo pinned on the ground while Inui twisted his arm behind his back. Inui firmly stated that the decision had already been made. Teiyo forcefully broke free before angrily shouting at Inui not to look down on him. He accused Inui of always acting the exact same way ever since the beginning, constantly smiling while making every important decision on his own. Inui calmly told him to listen carefully. He explained that their ultimate goal was to win the war against the endlessly appearing calamities and restore the peaceful world humanity once possessed. He emphasized just how valuable Koya's existence could become because of his unique ability to coexist and communicate with calamities. Inui suggested that Kuya might someday become the light, capable of solving everything. Teiyo scoffed at the idea. He questioned how someone who seemed to embody all of the world's weaknesses could ever become humanity's hope. Kuya stepped forward and admitted that he was not someone special at all. He confessed that he had willingly allowed a calamity to enter his body, and he honestly had no idea what might eventually happen to him. That was the reason he came there in the first place, because he could no longer handle everything alone. Then he made a serious request toward Inui. He asked that if he were ever fully possessed by the calamity and started hurting innocent people again, he wanted Inui to kill both him and the calamity together. Koya deeply bowed his head. Teiyo looked genuinely surprised by those words. Even Inui remained speechless for a few moments. Eventually, Inui gently patted Koya on the head and remarked that simply being capable of saying those words already proved how strong he truly was. With a warm smile, Inui told Koya to leave everything to him and promised that he would do absolutely everything possible to prevent that future from happening. Koya was deeply moved. Teiyo asked Inui whether he seriously intended to become friends with calamities. He completely rejected both Inui's ideals and the boy standing before him. He firmly believed that every single calamity had to be exterminated. Otherwise, humanity would never have a future. Inui remarked that gaining people's understanding was truly difficult. Koya could only respond with a small laugh. Inui then stated that there was no point in giving Kuya false comfort, so he decided to tell him the truth directly. Kuya would never be able to return to his old life again. From that moment onward, Kuya would accompany one of the numbers. Kuya replied that he had already prepared himself for something like that, though he soon reacted in surprise afterward. Inui explained that the numbers were a group filled with complete eccentrics, meaning Kuya would definitely struggle dealing with them. Then Inui carefully observed Kuya for a moment and calmly stated that something about him simply was not suitable. Later on, Kuya changed into a brand new uniform. It was the official Numbers Association uniform distributed to candidates. Inui wanted Kuya to wear it, and Kuya loudly declared that he would wear it forever without ever taking it off. Inui apologized for not answering Kuya's earlier question about how someone became one of the numbers. He explained that he did not stand at the top through effort alone. He stood there because of results. results gained from defeating more calamities and saving more people than anyone else. Then he told Kuya to produce results as well, and prove that he could become more useful to humanity than anyone else. Kuya immediately shouted an energetic and determined yes. That night, Kuya received a text message from Inui informing him that a calamity had appeared, and for this mission, he would be accompanying the problem child among the numbers, number 4, Teo. Although Koya already understood how difficult Teo was after meeting him the previous day, he became even more surprised after researching him further. During his student days, Teo had been disowned by his parents and climbed his way to success with nothing but his own abilities. Now, he managed host clubs, hostess clubs, and restaurants across the city. He carried the title Emperor of the Night. When Koya finally arrived at the mission site, Teo greeted him by saying he was glad Koya had managed to make it there. Because if Koya had arrived even a single second later, Teo would have already killed him. Startled, Koya immediately called out his name. However, Teo suddenly charged straight toward him while declaring that he still intended to kill him anyway. Teo called him a calamity. Koya was shocked. He barely managed to dodge the attack. Even then, the strike still grazed him. Kuya desperately told Teo to wait. Deep down, he wondered whether Teo hated him because of the calamity living inside him. However, Teo revealed that the real reason was because Kuya kept wagging his tail after Sika Inui. That completely confused Kuya. He remembered how Teo and Inui constantly argued the previous day and began wondering what kind of history the two of them shared. Teo then declared that even if Inui had decided to spare Koya, he personally would never acknowledge him until he judged the boy with his own eyes. 15 minutes remained before the calamity's appearance. Teo demanded that Koya prove his worth. Otherwise, he would kill him right there on the spot. Koya pointed out that unauthorized duels between rankers were forbidden and questioned what Inui would think if he saw this happening. Teo completely brushed off the mention of Inui because he had no intention of obeying him. He boldly declared that he himself was the rule. 14 minutes remained. Teo asked Kuya whether he truly had time to stand around chatting. Kuya thought about it carefully. Then, realizing that he could not afford to die there, he prepared himself to fight. He declared that he would become Teo's opponent. Meanwhile, back at the Numbers Association headquarters, Inui sat deep in thought. Mitsumi questioned whether it was really a good idea to send Koya out on a mission already. She worried that pairing Koya with Teo for 2 straight days would only end with him getting killed. Inui replied that he was not the one who decided the assignments. Even so, he believed Teo was already a grown adult and would know where to draw the line. He added that he was personally interested in the potential Koya possessed. Mitsumi asked whether that was because of the calamity living inside him. Inui replied that it was not. He explained that what truly interested him was Kuya himself, the fact that he still had not been completely consumed by the calamity. Inui remarked that Kuya seemed to be hiding something special, even if Kuya himself had not realized it yet. Back at the mission site, Kuya threw a powerful punch toward Teo. Teo calmly dodged the attack. Then he immediately counterattacked. Kuya instantly realized how painful the strike was. Teo was unbelievably strong, and Kuya was barely managing to keep up with him at all. Even so, Kuya believed he might still be able to land a counterattack somehow. He thought he could push through it, until his body suddenly began feeling strange. Kuya looked down at the cuts covering his arms. Teo laughed at him. Then he revealed that his ability involved toxins and poison. A status window appeared before Kuya, revealing Teo's level as 8,100. Kuya collapsed onto the ground, while writhing in pain. Teo smiled as he watched Kuya suffer. He expected even the slightest movement to put Kuya through unbearable agony. Suddenly, the system notified Kuya about his skill. Unlimited Awakening. And then, the skill display suddenly turned blank. Kuya's eyes changed and began glowing blue. Teo revealed that his skill was called Toxin. In simple terms, he controlled poison itself. The poison released from his body destroyed nerves, muscles, and every single cell it touched. Mockingly, he asked Kuya if it hurt. Teo sneered and claimed that the pain should have been so unbearable that Kuya could not even move a single finger anymore. He stepped directly onto Koya's chest and coldly remarked that Inui's eyes were truly worthless. According to him, there was no way someone like Kuya could ever become humanity's hope. Then he asked the Calamity brat whether he had any last words. However, after noticing that Kuya could not even speak because his windpipe had been blocked, Teo simply told him to die quietly like that. As Teo turned around to leave, Kuya suddenly warned him not to insult Inui. Teo immediately stopped in surprise. Kuya weakly stated that pain was nothing new to him because he had already experienced more than enough suffering in his life. To him, this level of pain was nothing. Then Kuya slowly forced himself back onto his feet. Teo stared at him in complete disbelief. The poison should have been powerful enough to instantly kill even an elephant. At that moment, he realized that this kid was definitely abnormal. Teo repeated Kuya's earlier words about not insulting Inui. He insisted that he was merely speaking the truth, because nobody else understood Inui's true dark nature. Kuya shouted at him to stop talking. He declared that Inui was the very first person who had ever acknowledged his existence, so he would never tolerate anyone insulting him. Teo warned Kuya that blind faith like that was dangerous. Suddenly, he activated a technique known as Pluto Snow, Ashes of Death. White particles slowly began falling from the sky. Kuya looked confused as he stared at the snow. Then, out of nowhere, birds suddenly died mid-air and crashed onto the ground. Kuya stood there dumbfounded. Only then did he realize that the snow itself was poisonous. Blood immediately started flowing from his eyes. It was a deadly snowfall that mercilessly took lives away. It resembled nothing less than a weapon of mass destruction. And to Teo, that overwhelming destructive force represented the true power of the numbers. Kuya collapsed face first into a pool of his own blood, while Teo calmly explained that no living creature had ever survived that attack before. He had buried countless calamities using that very same skill. Teo bitterly complained that everyone only ever praised Inui while labeling his own abilities as dangerous and uncontrollable instead. He added that Inui constantly kept everything tightly restrained and imposed restrictions on everyone around him. Even Teo himself was no exception. Then Teo glanced toward Kuya again, and immediately questioned why he was still standing. Apparently, Kuya had somehow moved behind him. Teo wondered whether Kuya possessed poison resistance, or if his body was somehow producing antibodies and detoxifying itself in real time. In the end, he concluded that no normal human should have been capable of something like that. He questioned whether this power came from the calamity living inside Kuya, or from something else entirely. A status screen suddenly appeared. It identified Kuya Kamakami with no skill, level 8, and the rank of Awakening. The most suspicious part was the fact that there was still no listed skill at all. Kuya firmly declared that he would never hand his body over to Mugen ever again. With intense determination burning in his eyes, he shouted that he absolutely could not die there. Teo grinned wildly and remarked that Kuya was the very first person who had ever stood back up after being poisoned by him. He exclaimed that Kuya's existence itself was completely insane. The two immediately clashed once again. Their battle rapidly intensified. At that exact moment, the countdown finally reached 0. A portal suddenly shattered open. Then a grotesque blue creature manifested before them. Both Kuya and Teo instantly shifted their attention toward the monster and shouted at it to get out of their way. The two moved at explosive speed and tore straight through the creature together. A massive shockwave erupted throughout the surroundings. Only seconds after killing the Calamity, both of them immediately charged toward each other once more while unleashing fiery waves of energy. Shouting fiercely, they hurled their fists toward one another. However, a loud announcement suddenly echoed throughout the area. The emergency broadcast informed all nearby residents that the Calamity had already been successfully subjugated and that the restricted zone had officially been lifted. The announcement repeated itself again. Teo looked disappointed. He acknowledged that Kuya had managed to survive against him. Unexpectedly, Teo invited Kuya to come work under him instead. Kuya was completely caught off guard by the offer. However, he refused. He chose to place his trust in Inui instead. Teo simply replied that it did not matter either way. He only emphasized that he had already warned Kuya. Then he quietly walked away. Kuya reflected that in the end, he still had not learned the truth behind everything. He continued wondering what exactly was going on with Inui. From that day onward, number 4, Kozuki Teo, was no longer recognized as one of the numbers, and his whereabouts eventually became unknown. Inui received the news regarding Teo. Inui apologized and admitted that he had never imagined Teo would act that way. He blamed himself for failing to foresee what would happen. However, Kuya immediately told him that he did not need to apologize for any of it. Inui replied that mistakes made within their organization were still ultimately their responsibility. Then, as Teo's older brother, he apologized once again. Kuya froze in complete shock after hearing that the two of them were actually siblings. Inui casually asked whether he had never mentioned it before. Then he calmly confirmed that he and Teo were indeed brothers. Kuya pointed out that the information had never even been publicly revealed, not even to Inui's own fans. Inui replied that he personally had no issue making it public, but he believed Teo would have hated that. He admitted that he had never truly been able to understand his younger brother and bitterly referred to himself as a failure of an older brother. Then Inui asked whether Teo had said anything about him during the mission. Kuya remembered Teo talking about Inui's hidden dark nature and even inviting him to work under him instead. But in the end, Kuya simply answered that Teo had not really said anything. Inui quietly acknowledged the answer before informing Kuya that he had successfully subjugated the Calamity and completed the mission. Then, with a calm smile, he invited Kuya to come back home. Kuya Kamikami stood in front of his school building and quietly acknowledged that it had been a long time since he last returned there. Earlier, Inui had instructed him to go back to school. Kuya hesitated and pointed out that it might be dangerous because calamities naturally gathered around him now. Inui questioned whether that was really a reason to avoid going, especially when Kuya still needed to handle withdrawal procedures and collect his belongings. Then he asked whether Kuya truly did not want to meet his teachers or say goodbye to his friends. He reassured Kuya that he would personally handle all the arrangements, so Kuya did not need to worry about calamities appearing. Inui then instructed Shizuka to prepare everything. Shizuka confidently assured him that she would handle all the arrangements properly. Inui simply told Kuya to enjoy his final day at school. Standing alone at the school gates, Kuya thought to himself that Inui was genuinely kind. However, he personally did not have many good memories connected to school. Suddenly, someone shouted his name from behind him. Startled, Kuya turned around and saw teacher Okabe. Kuya immediately remembered how Okabe once called him a failure and a disgrace to the school, even ordering him to start over from the very beginning. The teacher looked like he was about to say something, but Kuya suddenly blurted out an apology for being absent without permission. Unexpectedly, the teacher burst into laughter and said that it was not a problem at all. He even added that Kuya had become the pride of the school. Kuya stood there completely dumbfounded. The other students soon noticed him as well and immediately recognized him as the numbers candidate. Excitedly, they shouted that he was the same numbers candidate they had seen on the news. They talked about how Kuya and Kozuki Teo had successfully wiped out a calamity together. Kuya had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. He quickly searched it online and confirmed that the news was actually real. A crowd instantly gathered around him and began asking endless questions about the numbers. Kuya answered that he had personally met Inui, which immediately made everyone even more excited. Then suddenly someone forcefully pushed through the crowd. A man glared at Kuya and demanded to know whether he was that Hachiko bastard. Kuya recognized him as one of Tanba's men and cautiously mentioned that he had heard Tanba was currently hospitalized. The man brushed it off and told Kuya not to talk about someone who was not even there. Then his attitude suddenly became friendly as he told Kuya that he was amazing now, so it did not feel right calling him Hachiko anymore. He quietly whispered that he was actually a huge fan of Mitsumi and asked Kuya if he could somehow get her autograph for him. Kuya replied that he would try since he had already met her before. The man became extremely excited after hearing that. Kuya felt completely overwhelmed by the sudden change in treatment. Later, he attended class and chatted casually with his classmates. Then he joined sports activities and surprisingly did well at them. He even ate lunch together with his friends. For the first time, it made him realize that school was actually fun. As Kuya reflected on everything, he realized that while he had never truly liked school itself, it had still been the only place where he ever felt like he belonged. And now, he could never return to that ordinary life again. Suddenly, a black vehicle screeched to a stop right in front of him. Kuya and the others stared in shock. Shizuka stepped out of the car and informed him that she had come to pick him up. She explained that Inui was currently waiting for him at the numbers headquarters because of an urgent matter. Kuya immediately recognized her as Inui's secretary. Then, in the blink of an eye, the car sped away. His classmates watched in complete awe while commenting on how cool everything looked. Back at the numbers headquarters, Inui warmly greeted Kuya and asked how school had gone. Kuya looked slightly unwell, but he quickly replied that it was nothing serious. Then, he brought up how everyone suddenly doted on him now, something that would have been impossible before the Calamity incident. He admitted that the feeling was strangely complicated. Inui commented that Koya was still pessimistic as always. He added that if he were in Koya's position, he would probably just accept that power as his own ability. Koya immediately puffed up and argued that it really was his ability, and the exaggerated way he reacted caused both of them to laugh together. Afterward, Inui explained that Koya would continue accompanying the numbers from now on. He warned him that the numbers were filled with even more eccentric people than Teiyo, meaning Koya's struggles were only beginning. Then Inui asked whether Koya could truly keep up with all of them, to which Koya confidently answered yes. Koya then asked about the emergency situation. Inui glanced toward Shizuka and asked her to explain everything instead. Shizuka informed Kuya that they would first do a little studying before getting into the main topic. She explained that calamities originated from another world, and the stronger a calamity was, the longer it took to fully transfer into their world. After noticing Kaoya's reaction, she asked what the problem was. Kaoya casually replied that the drawing she used was cute. Shizuka immediately blushed and hurriedly told him to focus properly. She continued explaining that for advanced or higher-level gate transfers, the remaining transfer time would appear as a visible countdown counter. The basic mechanism was simple. Once the number reached 0, a calamity would manifest. Moving on to the actual topic, Shizuka asked whether Kaoya had heard about the gate that appeared in Yokohama. Kaoya confirmed that he had seen it reported on the news. It was a mysterious gate where absolutely nothing had emerged. Shizuka explained that it had originally been classified as an advanced gate because of its transfer time, so the association stationed top-ranked individuals nearby in preparation for advanced-level calamities. However, even after the countdown reached 0, nothing appeared from the gate at all. Because of that, the association continued monitoring it closely. But only moments earlier, there had finally been movement inside the gate. Kuya immediately asked whether a calamity had emerged, but instead of a monster, what came out was black mist. Kuya reacted in complete shock. Shizuka explained that all communication systems and radio signals within the surrounding area had become completely disrupted. Because visibility inside the mist was nearly non-existent, nobody knew what was actually happening within the zone. Inui added that there were far too few similar cases for them to properly analyze the situation. As a precaution, they decided to dispatch the numbers in case a special grade calamity eventually appeared. That meant Kuya, alongside the numbers, would immediately head to the site in order to investigate the area and rescue the team members trapped inside. Their mission was to seal the gate itself. Kuya quietly wondered whether sealing a gate was even truly possible. It sounded like an incredibly difficult mission. However, the numbers possessed gate-sealing specialists, and those individuals were already heading toward the site. Suddenly, someone burst into the room. A man stumbled inside while covered in blood and leaning heavily against a crutch. He apologized to Inui and claimed that the calamity had gotten the better of him, so he could no longer continue the mission. Gasping heavily, he declared that he would leave the rest in their hands. Koya's jaw instantly dropped. Then the man collapsed onto the floor. Koya immediately recognized the injured man as Sasaragi, one of the numbers. He urgently shouted for someone to call medical treatment immediately. However, Kuya became confused when he noticed Inui's completely calm expression. Inui simply told Sasaragi to stop fooling around because he struggled dramatically like this every single time. Kuya stared in confusion. Sasaragi let out a tired sigh. Then suddenly, he stood up perfectly fine as if absolutely nothing had happened. Kuya was completely dumbfounded. Sasaragi had never actually been injured at all. He simply muttered that everything was annoying. Then he looked toward Koya and asked who exactly he was. He mentioned that Koya's face looked strangely familiar. Then suddenly, he remembered. Without warning, Sasaragi started flailing dramatically across the floor. He complained that even thinking, standing, and sitting down felt like too much effort. Then he asked once again who the kid was supposed to be. Koya introduced himself properly. The moment Sasaragi heard the name, he immediately realized that this was the same person the association had been making a huge fuss about. He instantly told them not to drag him into this mess because it sounded far too troublesome for him to tolerate. Sasaragi then asked Inui what exactly was happening and whether he was supposed to head to Yokohama now. Inui calmly assigned him to the mission. Sasaragi would accompany Koya to seal the gate, while also teaching him everything he needed to know. Koya looked completely surprised by the decision. However, Sasaragi looked even more shocked than him, and his reaction came out as one extremely long, confused, "Huh?" He immediately refused. He demanded to know why he had to take on such an unbelievably troublesome assignment. Inui calmly told him to stop whining and explained that guiding candidates was part of the official duties of the numbers. Panicking, Sasaragi argued that guidance meant he would actually have to think for himself and make decisions personally. Then he continued rolling around on the floor while throwing a full tantrum because the entire thing sounded like way too much work. Completely freaked out, Kaoya wondered what exactly was wrong with this guy. A helicopter flew over Yokohama toward a massive black mist covering the area. From the open door, Koya called out to Sasaragi as he spotted the fog and confirmed that the entire place was surrounded by it. Inside the helicopter, Sasaragi cried out that he was terrified because he had acrophobia and desperately begged to go home. Kuya shouted that he had never heard of a number being afraid of heights and called it completely troublesome. Sasaragi argued that dismissing it was discrimination against numbers. As Kuya told him to stop talking nonsense, Sasaragi collapsed onto his seat and claimed he was losing consciousness from fear. Kuya watched him fall asleep. It made him wonder whether he was really okay. The two stood before the black mist. Kuya remarked that it looked even more ominous up close. Their mission was to rescue the rankers, subjugate the Calamity, and close the gate. When Kuya asked if he could really close it, Sasaragi suddenly claimed he was suffering from malnutrition, muscle strain, and a skull fracture while pulling out an IV drip. He really was overreacting. Kuya shouted in shock and demanded to know why he even had that with him. Sasaragi lay down on a nearby bench and weakly said he would leave the rest to Koya. Deep inside, Koya knew he was faking it. He questioned why someone like him belonged to the numbers. He then concluded that he had to handle the situation himself. Unlike previous calamities, this black mist was completely unknown. At first, he doubted himself. Then he resolved that he had to do it for the sake of Inui, who had acknowledged him. Determined, Koya declared that he could do it before the mist suddenly swallowed him. Outside, Sasaragi rested comfortably on the bench with his IV drip and muttered that he was glad he slept. Shocked, Koya suddenly found himself dragged deep into the fog. The inside was completely dark. He could barely see anything. He wondered if the advance team had also been dragged in like that. Suddenly, something tried to attack him. Kuya dodged immediately. He was surprised by what he saw next. There were countless monstrous hands. He wondered if the black mist itself was the Calamity. He activated his skill, Infinite Awakening. He dodged the attacks. He tried to punch it, but he realized he was not hitting anything. He figured it was because the creature was made of fog. His eyes widened in shock. A massive force slammed into him and blasted him backward. He raised his guard against the shockwave. But suddenly, a giant, dark hand grabbed his body and restrained him completely. More clawed hands surrounded him as he realized the Calamity could attack him freely while his own attacks could not connect. The Calamity overwhelmed him with relentless attacks. He gritted his teeth in frustration and remarked how unreasonable the situation was. He forced himself free and decided to retreat. He realized that it was foolish to fight head-on in the enemy's territory. He added that fighting without knowing the opponent's characteristics was beyond stupid. The black mist continued chasing after him. He resolved to wait and watch. Meanwhile, Sasaragi looked comfortable on the bench. He wondered if Koya had already run away. However, he quickly realized that was not happening and that Koya was clearly aiming for something. Hiding behind a wall, Kuya realized the Calamity was looking for him visually. He concluded that the main body controlling the hands was hidden somewhere inside the fog. Kuya forced himself to think carefully to find it. He remembered information about every number. Then he recalled a ranker from 4 years ago who fought a slime Calamity. That Calamity could dissolve into water, become invisible, and attack freely when cornered. However, the ranker still found a way to defeat it. Koya remembered how brilliant and messy that battle had been. He was so excited and trembling back then when he learned about it. Koya realized the same method might work here, although it carried serious risks. Suddenly, a black mist loomed directly overhead. Looking up, Koya saw the missing rankers suspended in the air beneath a strange purple aura. At first, he feared they were dead, but on closer look, he realized they were still alive. He knew he could save them if he acted fast. He released a burst of energy and shouted for the Calamity to reveal itself. A glowing red eye stared at him from the darkness. Kuya tried to sense where it was watching him from. Kuya immediately charged forward. A massive blast of purple energy suddenly rained down on him. His eyes widened in shock as he witnessed how huge the Calamity reality was. He defended himself while enduring the relentless attacks. though he got scratched all over his body. Then he remembered a detail. The ranker from before had fled to a palace while taking enemy attacks. That place was surrounded on 3 sides by reefs. He went to a dead-end alley. Back then, the ranker lost his escape route, making him desperate. Finally, a goblin appeared. The alleyway was empty when it showed up, so it got confused. Kuya realized that the series of actions of the ranker became his strategy to lure out the invisible Calamity. He showed himself and attacked the Calamity. This was possible not only because of Mugen's power, but all his efforts over the years which he thought were pointless. But it bore fruit. Meanwhile, Sasaragi was still relaxing on the bench. But then, he opened his eyes when he felt something was wrong. At the same time, Kuya closed in to declare a checkmate. Suddenly, his power stopped. He was shocked. His body suddenly refused to move. Inside him, Mugen grinned widely. He declared that the skill Infinite Awakening had been forcibly stopped. A countdown timer appeared before Kuya, stating that the skill would remain locked for 120 seconds. Kuya's body stopped moving. Mugen remarked that the skill apparently had usage restrictions. It made sense when Kuya used it often. The timer continued counting down until restart. Sasaragi lay on the bench and wondered if Kuya had already run out of skills. He muttered that Kuya was a complete idiot. Meanwhile, the goblin was confused. It inspected him, and started mocking him by showing its butt to him while he couldn't move. Then it had thought of an evil plan. Kuya was confused when purple mist swirled around him. Massive clawed arms emerged from the darkness as the creature transformed into a gigantic, horned demon. Kuya froze in shock. The Calamity slammed him into the ground and crushed him beneath overwhelming purple energy. Kuya cried out. The Calamity began concentrating its energy. Kuya knew this was really bad. He saw the timer, and it still wasn't ready. He desperately wished it would go faster. Suddenly, Sasaragi rushed toward him while calling him brat. However, even he realized he would not reach Kuya in time. The Calamity fired a massive blast of purple energy directly at Kuya. The attack struck him head-on. Kuya collapsed motionless in a pool of blood. The red screen continued to display his skill as an Infinite Awakening. But it changed to blue, and the skill showed a dash instead. The Calamity menacingly loomed over Kuya's body. From a distance, even Sasaragi was left stunned. But something caught his attention. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light burst from Kuya's body and shot into the sky. Blue energy completely enveloped him as a massive aura surged upward. Sasaragi wondered if it was some sort of recovery or restoration. At first, he suspected it was another Calamity ability. But nope. This is entirely different. Kuya suddenly gasped and woke up. He was panting heavily. Sasaragi stared at him in disbelief and asked what was that. That's when Kuya finally noticed him. Kuya thought it was his imagination that the attack went through him. Sasaragi realized that Kuya himself did not notice what had just happened. Just as he expected, Kuya might actually be amazing. Kuya immediately warned him that the Calamity could manipulate fog. Sasaragi simply asked whether he locked his house. Kuya was so confused, but he continued to remind him not to forget to lock up. Then, a glowing key materialized in Sasaragi's hand. As he activated his skill, lock. A massive seal with a giant keyhole instantly stopped the Calamity. He then lectured that forgetting to lock things would eventually ruin Kuya. Kuya was confused when he saw the Calamity had stopped. Sasaragi casually explained that he had locked its movements and that it would not move until the lock was released. Then, he told Kuya to finish the rest himself. Kuya could not believe Sasaragi had stopped it so easily. Sasaragi asked him how he figured out how to take the Calamity out of the fog. He wondered if he got the idea on the spur of the moment or if someone suggested it. He explained that he had spent years studying the numbers because he once wanted to become one himself. That said, he researched past calamities and how to defeat them, and for this calamity, he copied the strategy used by a ranker who once fought a slime calamity. The ranker sacrificed himself and defeated the calamity. Kuya was moved by that action. Sasaragi recalled the slime calamity from years ago. That ranker was him. Back then, he had sealed it using lock and declared that he would never allow calamities to do as they pleased. He was just humanity's corporate slave, but he was determined to defeat it. Back then, our boy Sasaragi was passionate, not anything like his current self. The memory faded as a shadow cast on Sasaragi's face. Koya noticed his expression. Sasaragi clicked his tongue and complained that Koya was troublesome. Eventually, the black fog disappeared as soon as the calamity was stopped. Sasaragi agreed and noted that the trapped rankers could now be saved. But they were up for another surprise. Multiple gates began opening around them. Koya panicked. Sasaragi noticed they were all advanced-level gates. He finally understood what the fog had been hiding the entire time. He also observed how it was intelligently planned. Koya asked him what they should do. The countdown was just below 5 seconds. In no time, several calamities had passed through the gate. Koya screamed in terror. He knew they can't deal with those many advanced ones. There will be so much damage if one of those gets out. Sasaragi groaned. He complained again about how troublesome it was. Another glowing key appeared in his hand. And an explosion happened. Koya could only stare in shock. Golden energy wrapped around Sasaragi, and a massive magic circle formed behind him. He activated his technique. Phosphorus flames shedding armor Sword King. Sasaragi muttered that it was so troublesome. Then he told Koya not to blink and that he should watch carefully. Koya focused intently. Koya called out to Sasaragi. He wondered what kind of technique it was. Sasaragi stood holding a massive key-like weapon, surrounded by a huge magic circle. He explained that it was Keelan flames that removed armor. This was the awakened form of his skill. Koya had never heard of a skill awakening before. He realized that such a transformation was impossible with ordinary skills. He concluded that Sasaragi had truly transcended humanity. Suddenly, he noticed something coming from the side. A massive, insect-like calamity suddenly lunged toward Sasaragi. Koya shouted for him to look out. When this calamity came close, the golden energy instantly incinerated it. The monster crumbled into ashes midair. Koya realized how intense it was that a low-level calamity can't maintain its body. It reminded him of the time when he faced Mugen. Mugen had watched and estimated Sasaragi to be at level 5. Then, he immediately corrected himself and realized that Sasaragi was closer to a level 10 calamity. Mugen observed that Sasaragi's combat power had risen drastically. Sasaragi observed, as a horde of calamities suddenly appeared before him. Koya got worried for Sasaragi since there were so many. Then, Sasaragi activated Royal Key Lock. Massive glowing keyholes appeared over the calamities and sealed their movements. After that, Sasaragi unleashed another technique called bumping, which made a massive explosion tore through the battlefield. Koya was left stunned. Sasaragi looked cool standing there as the explosions happened. He turned his gaze to Koya. Koya realized it was a perfect and complete elimination. Even advanced calamities were powerless before Sasaragi. He realized the true power of Sasaragi, who belonged in the numbers. Suddenly, Sasaragi groaned and expressed that he's exhausted. He laid on the ground as he complained that he did not want to do anything and wanted a helicopter to take him home so he could sleep. Koya told him not to sleep on the ground since he's an adult. Then, Koya excitedly bombarded him with questions about the technique and the idea of stripping armor from skills. He had never seen or heard of anything like it before. He wondered if he could use it too. Sasaragi bluntly told him there was no chance. He warned Koya not to underestimate the numbers. Koya was taken aback. It was not something Koya should know yet. Koya was confused. He dismissed the topic. Then, he suddenly screamed dramatically and claimed his muscle strain, appendicitis, and hemorrhoids had all flared up at once. Koya deadpanned that Sasaragi barely moved during the fight. He sighed at the man's terrible acting. Sasaragi simply lay there as he internally wondered if it was okay to show Koya the advanced technique. Just a little flashback. In his previous conversation with Inui, he expressed his refusal. He questioned whether Inui truly intended to drag Koya into their world. Inui replied that Koya probably wanted to be part of it. Sasaragi argued that Koya would not want it if he knew everything. Amused, Inui pointed out how rare it was for someone as lazy as Sasaragi to be so persistent. Given that Sasaragi was reluctant, he offered him a deal. If Sasaragi agreed to do it, he could take an entire week off. Sasaragi glared at him for playing dirty. Inui suggested that his daughter will be happy. He had information of her in his phone, so he knew that they had been living apart. He told Sasaragi that this is for humanity's future. With a heavy sigh, Sasaragi reluctantly agreed. Back in the present, Sasaragi lazily told Koya that even if he learned the truth now, it would still take him another 10 years to understand it. He advised Kuya to give up. Instead, Kuya declared that he would work as hard as possible. Sasaragi called him stupid and warned him not to overdo it. Kuya promised to work hard as he had to become stronger. He admitted that becoming strong still felt impossible for someone like him, and yet now he could fight the Calamity when he was just a useless hachiko who never awakened any skills. Sasaragi observed him and pointed out that Kuya did possess skills. Kuya was left confused. While they were conversing, several black crows gathered nearby. They were positioned above those two and watched them intensely. Elsewhere, Kurusu called out to Inui and reported that everything had gone according to his plan. Inui confirmed that Kuya truly possessed skills. He still doesn't know what. Kurusu noted that Inui seemed unusually happy. However, he expressed that showing Kuya an advanced skill was still too early. When the numbers even hid it from the government, let alone the public, he warned that if their plan ever became public, the balance of the world would collapse like opening Pandora's box. Inui chuckled and agreed that they must never become Prometheus, the one who gave fire to humanity, but he pointed out that a human capable of absorbing calamities had finally appeared once again, which meant that the time froze since that day, had finally begun moving forward. He claimed that because of Kuya, they could finally move forward. At the Numbers Association, Sasaragi groaned loudly while complaining about why he needed to go too. Kuya pointed out that it was a given that they had to report how the mission went. He yelled at him to stop complaining when he's laying in a cart as Kuya pushed him through the hallway. Sasaragi expressed that he couldn't do anything after his menacing armor release left his entire body out of commission and sore. Kuya doubted if he was telling the truth. Sasaragi grumbled that Inui should have been the one coming to thank him. He complained about that bastard, but Kuya told him it's enough since they're already at Inui's room. The door opened to reveal Kei Kusanagi. Kuya froze in shock as Kei stared at him coldly. Sasaragi casually asked if Kei's suspension had ended already. As Kei walked past Kuya, he declared that he had not lost. Sasaragi commented that he's a real handful. He warned Kuya to be careful since the kid had taken a liking to him. Kuya realized he's right since the guy attacked him out of nowhere. Kuya hated him. A voice from inside then invited them to enter. Kuya brightened when he saw Inui. Inui told them they did well on the mission. Standing beside him was a blonde woman in a lab coat. Kuya instantly recognized her. She was Jaime Kijoin of the Numbers 8. Kijoin identified him as Kuya Kamakami. Out of the blue, she licked his cheek. Of course. Our boy blushed and stumbled backward while screaming, "What?" He was embarrassed that she licked him. She smiled and told him he reeked of calamity energy. Inui asked her to examine Kuya's skill. Kuya realized she was analyzing him. Kijoin ordered Kuya to show his status screen. After seeing that the characteristics of the skill was in that notation, she understood why idiots mistake it for being useless. She clarified that the dash did not mean there was no skill, but it meant minus. Seeing how confused Kuya was, she knew the conversation wasn't going anywhere with an idiot like him. Kuya repeated the word in confusion. She rephrased it by calling it cancellation instead. She explained that Kuya possessed the ability to minus the power of skills and calamities and return them to 0. Suddenly, she slapped Kuya across the face to demonstrate that it does not work on everything and it had to be activated. Inui suggested that there's a condition to activate it. It could be when Kuya took a lot of damage or if in the verge of death. But what he's certain of is that this skill was suppressing the calamity inside Kuya. Kuya couldn't believe it. He remembered being bullied in the past for not having any skill. He was treated like an errand boy and was even nicknamed Hachiko. And now, he learned that he has skill all along. This made him emotional. He cried. But the moment was interrupted when Kijoin told them she disliked speculation and suggested dissecting him immediately to investigate further. Kuya reacted in horror at the mention of dissecting. Suddenly, a human leg emerged from Haim's mouth. They watched as more parts of the body came out. When she was done, she wiped her mouth and expressed that she created a perfect one. It was a clone of Kuya. Kuya couldn't fathom that he came out of her mouth. He panicked as he couldn't understand the situation. Plus, the clone was naked, so he felt embarrassed. Kijoin realized that Inui didn't tell the boy. She revealed that her skill was called duplication. By using her tongue, she could read a living being's information and create a perfect replica. She explained that while the clone was not alive, its body was completely identical to Kuya's, allowing them to study him through it. Sasaragi remarked that her skill was disgusting. Kijoin teased him by saying that his dissection brings back a lot of fond memories. She suggested doing it again. Sasaragi turned pale. He begged her not to make him remember, as it was torturous watching his own body get cut to pieces. He warned Kuya that it was not fun to watch. Kijoin announced that she would begin dissecting Kuya at once. Unexpectedly, the clone suddenly grabbed her by the throat. Everyone froze in shock. The clone warned her not to touch it so casually. Kuya saw Mugen in it. Kijoin glared at it. Using a scalpel, she took the clone's arm and remarked that the doll was surprisingly lively. Amused, she commented that things had finally become exciting. Kuya felt bad for his arm. She dragged the naked clone out of the room by its hair, casually stating that she would report back after learning more. Kuya bitterly watched. Inui explained that she was normally far too important to personally examine an ordinary rancor. He stated that this proved how much he expected from Kuya. Then he declared that Kuya was the one who would end the war against the Calamities, and that he believed Kuya was humanity's hope. Kuya remembered Inui calling him that before. Inui then went on to explain that humanity awakened because calamities appeared in the world. He stated that humans and calamities were two sides of the same coin. Because Kuya possessed both, he had the potential to transcend them entirely. However, Inui warned that Kuya's power remained incomplete and unrefined. He explained that this was why he had Sasaragi show him the armor release technique earlier. Inui clarified that majestic armor release was a secret art only permitted to the numbers. Because of that, Kuya needed to rise through the ranks quickly. He stated that ranks were determined through levels, skill proficiency, and mission record. After defeating 2 high-class calamities, Kuya had already risen from unranked to low rank. However, the road ahead was long and steep. Kuya had no choice but to continue training and climbing higher. Suddenly, the entire room shook violently. An overwhelming pressure filled the area. Kuya immediately broke into a cold sweat as he felt an aura far beyond anything he had ever experienced. He wondered if it was Mugen's. Inui wondered if the special grade calamity from 6 years ago had returned. Kuya realized he was talking about Mugen. Inui explained that the public believed he defeated the calamity back then, but in truth it vanished before the subjugation ended. He admitted that he never learned whether it returned to its world or simply hid somewhere else. Hearing this, Kuya nervously prepared to confess that Mugen was actually inside him. But before he could speak, Inui coldly stated that the creature destroyed the world and took away the person he loved. He swore he would kill it the next time they met. Kuya froze in shock from the killing intent. Mugen chuckled and told him that he doesn't mind if he snitches. He challenged Kuya to do it. Suddenly, a messenger burst into the room and reported that a special grade gate had appeared. The detected pressure was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. They believed it to be a new special calamity. The counter showed approximately 1 year before the calamity came out. Inui realized that it was a new one, and it will be there in a year. Sasaragi sighed and complained that this was becoming another massive pain in the ass. Inui expected Kuya to hear all of that. He stated that humanity only had 1 year left before disaster arrived. He expects Kuya to know what to do. Kuya was determined. He declared that he would become one of the numbers. 1 year passed in Tokyo, and only 1 week remained before the special grade gate opened. People went through their daily lives. One man remembered when the special grade calamity from 6 years ago had turned everything into a wasteland. He feared Tokyo would suffer the same fate if they failed to escape in time. Suddenly, there was a calamity warning. Then, a dark purple gate opened directly in the middle of the street. A massive serpent-like calamity emerged with a deafening screech. The crowd panicked and begged for help. Suddenly, bright orange energy descended from above. A powerful strike slammed into the calamity and crushed it instantly. The calamity was completely destroyed. The man thanked him and cautiously asked for his name. Kuya smiled casually and replied that he was nobody important. He was glad that they're safe. Suddenly, Sasaragi shouted at him not to leave them behind and complained about who would pull his cart. Kuya immediately snapped at him for constantly making other people drag him around. Sasaragi told him they should hurry to the Numbers Association since Inui was waiting for them. Kuya replied yes. It had already been 1 year since he last saw Inui. At Inui's office, Shizuka apologized and informed Kuya that Inui was not there. Surprised, Kuya explained that Inui himself had summoned him. She clarified that Inui was waiting somewhere else and asked him to follow her. As they walked downstairs, Shizuka thanked Koya for his hard work during the past year. She mentioned hearing that he fought calamities in America alongside Sasaragi. Koya explained that America lacked an organization like the Numbers. So many awakened individuals worked independently as bounty hunters. He admitted that dealing with both eccentric heroes and calamities made it the hardest year of his life. Shizuka noticed that his hair had grown much longer. Embarrassed, Kuya admitted he simply never had time to cut it. She observed that both his appearance and physique had changed so much that he barely looked like the same person from a year ago. Massive doors opened. It was an underground training facility. She explained that the Numbers and their candidates used it for training. Kuya noticed someone. It was Inui, and he excitedly announced that he had finally returned after a year of training. Inui noted that Koya was now rank 12, a level close to the Numbers themselves. However, he stated that it was now a matter of whether he had the strength to back it up. Suddenly, he suggested a match. He wanted to see if Koya could land a hit on him. He encouraged our MC to use his full power. Inui was holding the Judgment Sword, the weapon used to destroy calamities. Koya was aware that one hit would not let him get away unscathed. He realized Inui was completely serious. Instead of being scared, Koya felt excited, because it meant Inui truly acknowledged him. He inhaled deeply and shouted that he was grateful. At that same moment, our boy's hair changed color again to bright red. He was just like a Super Saiyan. He rushed forward at incredible speed and vanished from sight. Inui focused. He sensed Koya's punch and evaded it. Koya's fist was wrapped in energy. Inui witnessed the power of Calamity. Koya continuously tried to lunge him, but he evaded it all. Inui pointed out that Kuya had infinite awakening from the Calamity's power and minus for cancellation. He was curious on how he would use those opposing powers. He was excited to see Kuya's strength. Kuya activated minus. His hair turned back to normal again. Then, bright blue energy crackled around him. Kuya launched himself forward and collided head-on with Inui's golden energy. Inui was surprised. Kuya looked serious. He lunged at him mid-air. Inui realized Kuya could switch between his own skill and the Calamity's power with no lag. He also noticed that Kuya had gained perfect control over the Calamity's destructive energy and could concentrate it in one point. Inui admitted that even he could not take the attack head-on unharmed. Kuya extended his hand and activated minus. That power was a bluff. Kuya was about to punch him instead, but he was surprised. The sword was gone. Then countless glowing blades flowed above him. Inui smirked and asked how he planned to handle that. Kuya's brows furrowed. Energy gathered around his legs. Using explosive force, he launched himself through the air and avoided the barrage while counterattacking at the same time. Suddenly, a blade pierced into his body. Inui appeared behind him and pointed out that his back had been completely open. Kuya apologized, because he intentionally left it open. Then, Kuya unleashed a powerful kick directly into Inui. The impact sent Inui crashing backward. Kuya became confident, but he saw Inui was still standing. He had his shield up. Then he told Koya that the shield didn't make it in time, and he was scratched on the hand. He praised him for that strike. Kuya's eyes widened, and he rejoiced that he managed to do it. Inui observed that Kuya had not only mastered his own skill, but had also made the Calamity's power completely his own. Kuya explained that during training, the Calamity inside him eventually stopped trying to take over. Its power had begun to feel like a natural part of his body. He admitted he did not know whether it had simply given up. Inui remembered Kajoin's report. He came to her lab and saw the replica of the boy. She told him he could have it if he wanted to, but he refused. He asked what she learned, and she told him that the thing was no longer human. It was a calamity. Back in the present, Koya nervously asked if something was wrong. Inui replied that it was nothing. He thought to himself that he was worrying over nothing. Inui expressed that he was curious about what the calamity inside him looked like, but our MC remembered the killing intent that Inui released when he was talking about Mugen. Naturally, because of that, Kuya could never reveal the truth. Changing the subject, Inui reminded Kuya that the special grade gate would open in 1 week. He also pointed out that Kuya's mission was still incomplete. Kuya knew that it was because he still needed to become one of the Numbers. Inui explained that he would now teach both candidates the secret art known as refined armor release, which was required to join the Numbers. As Inui walked away, Koya suddenly paused at the mention of both. Then Kei Kusanagi appeared behind him and asked if Kuya was the other candidate. Kuya jumped back in surprise. Inui introduced Kei as rank 11 and Kuya as rank 12. He explained that the numbers only had 10 members. With Teo gone, one seat remained empty. Inui declared that Kauya and Kei would fight for that single position. Those two had their guards up. Kei stared at Kauya sharply. Tensions quickly flared. They both declared that they would become the next member of the numbers. The numbers was the title given to the rankers from rank 1 to rank 10. During the past year, Kuya trained to raise his rank to 11 so he could finally join them. But now he knew why he was stuck. The person standing in his way was Kei, the current rank 11. Kei glared at him and asked what he was staring at. Startled, Kuya replied that it was nothing. Kei acknowledged that Kuya's rank had risen rapidly. However, he declared that he would never allow Kuya to surpass him. He stated that he would master refined armor release first and secure his place among the numbers. He emphasized that it would not be Kuya. And of course, that offended our MC. They rode the elevator deeper underground. Kuya wondered what kind of trial awaited him, but he remembered how amazing Sasaragi's refined armor release, Ki King, was. Knowing the source of that power lay ahead filled him with excitement. He also realized they had descended incredibly far below ground. He started to wonder just how far they would go. The descent finally came to a halt in front of two massive doors. As the doors slowly opened, a blinding light poured out from inside. Inui warned them that everything beyond this point was top secret. He explained that only the numbers and a handful of high-ranking government officials knew about this place. It was a national-level secret. A massive green entity hung deep within the chamber, restrained by enormous chains. Kuya and Kei stared in disbelief and wondered if it was a calamity. Inui confirmed it. He introduced the entity as Eden and revealed that she was once human before becoming a calamity. Kei remarked that it sounded similar to someone he knew. Inui stated that Eden's past was a secret for another time. Then he revealed that the power of refined armor release came directly from Eden. Kuya struggled to process the revelation. Kei bluntly stated that none of that mattered to him. He only wanted to learn refined armor release as quickly as possible. Inui silently looked at him before leading them further inside. They arrived at an observation platform overlooking Eden. Inui explained that the ritual used to gain refined armor release was called Eden's Blessing. Kuya felt the overwhelming life force radiating from Eden. He could not believe it was the source of their power. Inui explained that touching Eden's abdomen would transport them into another dimension. There, they would face a trial where they had to fight and defeat a certain opponent. Kuya asked if they would fight a Calamity or Eden herself. Inui grinned, as he revealed that the opponent they had to defeat was themselves. He explained that mastering refined armor release meant surpassing one's own limits. Kuya reacted in surprise while Kei remarked that the trial sounded pretty standard. Kei was getting impatient. He asked if all he had to do was touch Eden to begin. Before allowing them to proceed, Inui revealed why the trial was treated as a numbers test. It was because they might not survive it, because defeating oneself meant death. Kuya froze in shock when he learned that he would die if he failed. Inui asked whether they considered the trial cruel or inhumane, because if that was the case, it meant they had already reached their limit. He reminded them that saving humanity was not something that could be achieved through ideals alone. Sweat rolled down Kuya's face. Kei was unfazed. He told Inui not to underestimate him and admitted that he did not care about that or even humanity. His only goal was to become stronger and surpass Inui. Kei reached out and touched Eden. A bright green light instantly swallowed him whole. Kuya watched in shock as Kei completely disappeared. Inui was amused that Kei was still fearless as ever. Then, he told Kuya it was his turn. Kuya hesitated as countless thoughts raced through his mind. He also worried about what Mugen would do if he died. It made him question whether he should continue. Suddenly, Sasaragi told him to quit if he did not like it. Kuya was surprised to see him. Inui questioned why Sasaragi was there. Sasaragi replied that people called Kuya humanity's hope, but after spending a year with him, he had never seen him that way. He called Kuya a coward, a crybaby, and a bedwetter, but one with a slightly stronger sense of justice. Sasaragi declared that Kuya was just an ordinary person who happened to care about others more than anyone else. Kuya was touched, but he argued that he had never wet himself. Kuya laughed and remarked that an ordinary person saving humanity sounded interesting. Koya apologized before declaring that he would not quit. Annoyed, Sasaragi told him to do whatever he wanted. He stated that from this point onward, Koya was on his own. As he walked away, Inui reminded him about his next mission. Sasaragi grumbled about being busy before leaving. Watching him go, Koya quietly thanked him. Then he steeled his resolve and reached toward Eden. A bright teal light engulfed Kei. It faded when he reached his destination. He found himself standing in a strange world surrounded by countless weapons embedded in the ground. He spotted something. Then, a figure identical to Kei emerged from the smoke. At the same time, both of them uttered, "What's your name?" Both of them remarked that they hated the look on each other's faces. Kei tried to activate his skills, only to realize they were not working. On the other hand, his clone immediately attacked with a glowing orb of energy. A violent explosion erupted across the platform. When the smoke cleared, Kei remained standing with only minor injuries. Smirking, he licked the blood from his hand and realized what kind of trial this truly was. He found it interesting. Meanwhile, Kuya found himself surrounded by white fog. When he opened his eyes, he was startled. He found himself in a horrifying red landscape filled with bones and carcasses. He wondered where he was. Suddenly, a figure appeared and admitted that he did not expect Kuya to come meet him. It was Mugen, and it greeted him with, "Long time no see, brat." Kuya was surprised. Elsewhere, a massive gate crackled with electricity near a sealed-off skyscraper. Standing before it, Sasaragi noted that a week had already passed. He stated that their mission was to contain the special grade gate. He reasoned that even delaying the disaster for a short time would be worthwhile if it reduced casualties. He especially wanted to protect his daughter, who was involved in the upcoming battle. Even so, they were facing a true special grade opponent, and if his power failed, the backlash would kill him. Remembering that Kuya was also fighting in his own way, Sasaragi decided to take the mission seriously. "Back to our MC!" Kuya demanded to know why Mugen was there. Mugen had heard all about refined armor release. He reminded Kuya about the being dwelling inside him. Mugen transformed into a form identical to Kuya. Kuya braced himself against the overwhelming pressure. Suddenly, he realized something was wrong. Seeing his reaction, Mugen knew that he had already noticed that he could not use his skills. Basically, he had to defeat him without skills. Kuya was spooked. Mugen mocked the look of despair on his face. Mugen offered to let Kuya win instead. Stunned, Kuya questioned what he meant. Mugen explained that Kuya growing stronger would benefit them both since they shared the same body. He confidently stated that Kuya could never defeat him anyway. He chuckled darkly and claimed that he could see right through Kuya's feelings. Kuya suddenly rushed forward and attacked him. Mugen was confused. Kuya told him not to be so nosy. He vowed to make him grovel and lick the ground. He challenged him to come at him with everything he had. Mugen remarked that he was trying to do something nice for once, but Kuya's reaction made him furious. He decided to kill him instead. Meanwhile, Inui enjoyed a cup of tea. He asked Shizuka if about an hour had passed since the others entered the trial. She answered with the exact time, and Inui remarked that time had flown by because of her tea. Shizuka politely accepted the compliment. Expecting the wait to take longer, Inui relaxed and continued drinking. But then he heard a noise. Kei stood behind him. He was surprised that it was already over. Kei replied yes. Inui commented that defeating a full specification copy of himself without skills must have been difficult even for Kei. Kei dismissed it, claiming the injuries were nothing serious and that it was not hard at all. He explained that he quickly understood the conditions of the trial, though he believed Koya would struggle much more. Then, he asked if passing the trial first officially made him one of the numbers. Inui clarified that Kei was never truly competing. He explained that if Kuya failed to survive, Kei would then take a position among the numbers. Kei frowned and asked what would happen if Kuya also succeeded. That question made Inui serious. But then, Inui replied that they would deal with it when the time came. Looking toward Eden, Inui wondered how Koya was doing. Inside the trial, Kuya charged at Mugen with everything he had despite losing access to his skills. Mugen overpowered him, but Koya kept charging forward and declared that he would win. Koya watched him carefully as he concentrated his power. Kaguya was surprised that he could offset his blows when minus should have been able to cancel the powers of calamities. He could not believe Mugen had already learned to use it that well in such a short time. A shadow fell over Kuya. Mugen's arm transformed into a gigantic demonic arm. Mugen slammed the massive attack down and caused a devastating explosion. Then he looked down at Koya and told him not to give up yet. Koya lay on the ground split in half while blood spread beneath him. Mugen told him not to die yet. Since Kuya had provoked him, Mugen told him that he should entertain him more. Kuya activated minus. Blue energy covered Kuya's body as it reconnected and healed him. Kuya gasped as he returned to one piece. Instantly, Mugen attacked him, forcing him to leap back and evade. Mugen used minus, causing Koya's wounds to reopen. Then Mugen did it again. Koya groaned in pain. Mugen remarked how convenient the ability was. He mocked Koya for being unable to properly use such powerful abilities despite possessing both minus and Mugen's power. Koya realized that the skill could be used that way. He thought he had mastered it through training, but Mugen's use of minus was on a completely different level. Mugen wanted to play with the power even more to see what else it could do. Koya told him to stop. He did not want the skill to be used for fun, because it was a power meant to protect people. To Mugen, that made no sense. He told Koya that his view was too narrow and that he kept forcing his own way of thinking onto others, which was not Mugen's style. It was also why Mugen saw it as a powerful offensive technique. He told Koya to stay there and watch. He would demonstrate his power and his use of minus. The strongest calamity in the world is now trying to merge its power in our boy's skill. Kuya was shocked. He saw Mugen erase his own attack. He became curious about what would happen next. Mugen questioned where the erased power went. He gathered the energy into a massive sphere of power. Kuya watched intensely. Mugen then explained that according to the laws of the world, nothing could truly return to nothingness. He knew Kuya would understand if he learned more about it. He demonstrated another use of the power. The sphere grew bigger, and Kaguya was blasted away. Mugen remarked that Kaguya lacked imagination. At that moment, our MC had a flashback. Sasaragi once told Kaguya that his lack of imagination was holding him back, and that if he improved it, he would transform. In the middle of the chaos, Koya felt something inside him awaken. Refusing to die, he reached out. He was determined not to give up. Suddenly, Eden appeared and told him that the word that described him was indomitable. He was granted the power of a true awakening. Kuya could now use refined armor release. Power surged through him. Mugen was shocked at what he was seeing. Then our MC unleashed Kagin Joju, Flower Illusion Purification. Kuya could not believe that he had really received the blessing of Eden. This right here is his release armor. A few seconds after that, Kuya's body began to fade away. Mugen was displeased. The kid really passed the test. But eventually he decided it was fine, because the fatter the kid got, the more he would gain. Then he turned his attention to Eden and admitted that he did not expect to meet her there. And now I'm wondering what's the connection of Mugen to other calamities like Eden. A green aura brought Kuya back to the training facility. He slowly opened his eyes and saw Inui and Kei waiting for him. They watched him. Excited, Kuya declared that he had finally mastered refined armor release. Inui patted his head. He smiled and congratulated him. He also acknowledged all of his hard work. Irritated, Kei complained that he had not received a single word of praise. He accused Inui of having a favorite and complained that it was not fair since he had maintained rank 11 and should be praised more. More than that, Inui had assigned Sasaragi as Kuya's master and paid too much attention to Koya. Kuya was caught off guard by how furious Kei was. He realized that Kei was jealous, and that Kei wanted to be recognized by Inui too. He started to see Kei as someone just like him. Koya offered his hand and suggested that they keep working hard together. Kei was annoyed. Kei asked Inui what they should do next, now that both of them had mastered refined armor release. It was exactly what Kuya wanted. Suddenly, a heavy pressure spread through the air. Inui immediately realized that Sasaragi had activated his refined armor release. He knew that Sasaragi was currently on a mission at a special grade gate, and a special grade calamity had appeared. It made him wonder if something had happened at the gate that required refined armor release. Kei said there was no point wasting time thinking about it. Kuya urged Inui to head there immediately. It made Inui smile to see how reliable they were. Inui was just about to call Shizuka, but before he could say anything, she informed him that the preparations were complete. Then a massive purple door appeared before them. Inui explained that Shizuka's skill, Guiding Door, allowed them to travel anywhere by imagining the destination. Kuya stared at the portal in amazement. He told them they were moving out to the special grade gate. Kuya thought about Sasaragi as he passed through the door. The door had appeared at the location. A shocking scene awaited them. The ground was painted red, with the blood of the corpses lying everywhere. Inui recognized that they were the rankers who had accompanied Sasaragi. He commented that it was horrifying. Kei observed that the gate and timer remained unchanged. Inui examined the bloodstains and concluded that the Calamity was special grade and powerful enough to force Sasaragi to use refined armor release. Inui wondered what could have happened there. Kei looked around and noticed that Kuya was missing. He thought Kuya was being slow and felt annoyed that he was not there yet. But Inui confirmed that they had gone through the door at the same time. He wondered if Kuya had imagined a different place and ended up somewhere else. Meanwhile, Kuya was thinking about arriving at Sasaragi's side. Inui realized something as he looked at the door. Kuya had teleported directly to Sasaragi's location. He was overwhelmed by what he saw. A massive calamity floated high above the battlefield, releasing an overwhelming presence, while Sasaragi struggled to keep it locked down. Kuya noticed something. The calamity's body looked strange. It seemed incomplete because its lower half was nothing but bones. It looked ominous. Its appearance was as if all the horrors of the world had taken physical form. Kuya's body instinctively rejected the sight before him. He was terrified. But he reminded himself that there was no time to be afraid while Sasaragi was still fighting. He had to help. He announced his presence to Sasaragi. Unexpectedly, glowing chains suddenly bound him in place. He recognized Sasaragi's lock technique. Sasaragi ordered him not to come any closer. Kuya could not believe it. He explained that the enemy was likely a special-grade calamity that had not yet fully manifested. He was determined to defeat it, so he activated a massive magic circle. The calamity found itself completely restrained. He realized that he could not do anything. He remarked that Sasaragi's skill was truly worthy of an SSR rating, and he was very pleased with it. The calamity reflected on how disappointed he had been by the weak abilities of the rankers he had encountered before. This calamity was especially interested in human skills. He thought he might get a lucky draw, but to his disappointment, they had all been garbage skills. But to him, Sasaragi was wonderful. Kuya was completely dumbfounded. Meanwhile, Sasaragi was starting to get annoyed. The calamity had been locked, yet it kept chatting away. Given its high intelligence and ability to speak, its traits clearly proved that it was a special-grade calamity. Even so, Sasaragi had stopped its movements, which meant his skills were effective. He was confident enough to see this through. Kuya cheered that he could do it. Sasaragi gathered his power and prepared his ultimate technique, bumping unlock. But before he could finish casting it, something went wrong. Suddenly, a grotesque bloody hand pierced straight through his chest. The calamity chuckled as Sasaragi fell to his knees and bled heavily. The calamity mockingly apologized that its hand had reached him before he could stop it. Kuya stared in horror and called out to him. He cursed the calamity. He activated Minus and broke free from the chains. Then he rushed towards Sasaragi, but the chains started appearing again. They surrounded him and eventually wrapped around his body. Then Sasaragi uttered that he was glad that the kid had mastered refined armor release. He admitted that he had not been a good master, but he asked Kuya to grant him one final request, and that was to run, because Kuya should not throw his life away there. Tears formed in Koya's eyes. Meanwhile, the calamity started to move. It opened its mouth wide to devour Sasaragi. Kuya appeared and threw a devastating punch. It was a powerful blow that unleashed a violent shockwave as the calamity crashed into the far side of the area. The calamity was shocked. Kuya apologized for disobeying Sasaragi. Then he activated his refined armor release and declared that he would kill this calamity. The calamity chuckled as he realized that this was another lucky draw. Kei sensed an overwhelming pressure. He wondered if it came from God and refined armor release. He could tell it was far away. Inui thanked him for waiting. He had to use his phone to issue emergency requests to the numbers. Kei questioned whether they really needed reinforcements. Inui reminded him that dealing with special-grade calamities was the true duty of the numbers. Even the slightest chance of facing one required them to respond seriously. With the preparations complete, they stepped toward Shizuka's door. They were stunned. They saw Koya's refined armor release. Seeing his skill, The Calamity was pleased with his lucky draw. Koya declared to Sasaragi that he would kill the Calamity and save him. Sasaragi called him an idiot. The Calamity laughed mockingly. Suddenly, the Calamity sent a flurry of fleshy appendages downward. Koya counterattacked with flowery illusion purification, and he used minus to intercept the assault. The Calamity could not understand what had just happened. His flowery illusion purification could also be described as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It was an ability that pushed the original skill, minus, to its limit. Even though he had only just acquired it, he felt as if it had always been a part of him. Again, he used flowery illusion purification, plus, and after canceling out the Calamity's attack, he added an attack of his own. The Calamity noticed that Koya was using his skills against him. He grew furious. He shouted that unauthorized use was unforgivable. His appendages clashed against Koya's own version of the same attack. He could not believe he was losing against his own skills. Koya was serious. He used flowery illusion purification again. And this time, it was the times version. His appendages multiplied into billions. The Calamity was overwhelmed. He complained that Kuya had a terrible personality. He stated that even if Kuya tried to capture him, it would not be that easy. The Calamity's severed hand charged from behind. Sasaragi shouted a warning. Kuya did not move. He muttered that there was no such thing as a cowardly move when lives were at stake. This was a battle for survival, and it was 2 against 1. So Kuya used flowery illusion purification, divide. He stopped the detached hand before it could strike. The Calamity stared in shock. 100 clones of Koya appeared. Inui and Kei were stunned. Even Sasaragi was surprised. The Calamity panicked and called the display a cowardly act. But Kuya pointed out that the Calamity was no different. The Calamity was doomed. His screams echoed throughout the forest. Blue ropes of energy wrapped tightly around his body and completely restrained him. Sasaragi was overwhelmed, since even his lockdown skill could barely stop the Calamity. He realized that Kuya's interpretation of his abilities had expanded far beyond what he expected. He felt like he had lost his place as Kauya's master. Crimson energy gathered in Kauya's hand. Kauya told the Calamity to hurry up and die. The bound creature scoffed in amusement. He realized that the immense power Kauya wielded was not truly his own. It sensed another Calamity existing inside him. At that moment, Inui stepped forward and praised Kuya for controlling such tremendous power. He offered to help finish off the Calamity together, but Kuya politely refused and declared that he would kill it himself. Desperate, the Calamity begged the being inside Kauya to listen. He urged the Calamity inside Kuya to stop the attack, or else he would be killed, and if he died there, the Calamity's ultimate goal would be delayed. Then, a massive blast of Kuya's energy erupted. The Calamity barely survived. His body was split in half. Koya demanded to know what he meant by the Calamity's goal. He warned the creature to speak quickly if it wanted a painless death. The Calamity chuckled. He desperately begged for mercy while inwardly urging them to hurry. Suddenly, a massive gate appeared. Some flesh fell from it. Apparently, they were hands. The Calamity called the hands toward himself. He was glad they had arrived. He declared that carelessness was an enemy. Lots of hands were coming towards our MC's way. Inui wondered where those hands had come from, until they wrapped around his limbs. But unlike the first attack, Koya was definitely tied this time. The Calamity declared that luck was on his side. Koya sensed something approaching. Inui grew worried for Koya as a horde of detached Calamity hands descended toward him. By that point, Sasaragi was already weak. At the same time, someone drew a sword and slashed through the hands. Some of them were even blasted in an instant, and these attacks were all coming from other rankers. Apparently, other numbers had arrived. There were 3 of them. They asked Inui if that was a special grade Calamity. Inui was pleased that they had come. Among them was Ukibori Manabu. He complained about leaving cram school only to arrive after the battle was nearly over. And Kiritsu Tsuyoshi. He warned him not to lower his guard and reminded him that anything could happen in battle. Ukibori grumbled about being lectured by someone ranked below him. Nearby, Long Wanren muttered, "Gold sphere." Kiritsu asked Ukibori what Wanren had said. Ukibori explained that it meant testicles in Chinese, making Kiritsu instantly regret asking. Ukibori then noticed Kouya and asked Kiritsu if Kouya was stronger than him. Kiritsu replied that maybe he was, but he scolded Ukibori for teasing him. Ukibori cheerfully explained that Kiritsu was basically the weakest among the numbers. He added that Sasaragi stayed at number 9 out of laziness, while Mitsumi was too cute to tease. He then asked what had happened to Sasaragi. Meanwhile, Inui approached Kauya and acknowledged his determination to defeat the Calamity with his own power. But he also reminded him that the numbers carried the burden of protecting humanity and honoring those who had already died fighting calamities. It was the responsibility that rested on the shoulders of the numbers. Inui declared that from that moment onward, the numbers would use their full strength to eliminate the special grade Calamity. The Calamity was delighted to see so many SSR ranks. He wanted to be picky, but he could not replace the lives he had already collected. He thanked them all for coming. He announced that his show had ended and warned them to watch their backs on the way out. Countless appendages attacked them, but Kauya was determined not to let him escape. He noticed that the Calamity was targeting Sasaragi. Sasaragi was shocked when he saw it rushing toward him. The Calamity twisted its body into a long, slender shape, and then it entered Sasaragi's mouth. Inui could not believe that the Calamity had entered Sasaragi's body. Kuya turned pale. He watched in horror. The Calamity inside Sasaragi chuckled. Everyone was spooked. Kuya could not believe that Sasaragi had become like him. The Calamity declared that it was a truly monumental experience. Then, the Calamity activated Sasaragi's mirroring ability and locked everyone in glowing red chains. The group panicked as they realized that the Calamity could now use Sasaragi's powers. The Calamity wanted to try even more skills. An overwhelming red aura erupted as the ultimate attack. Babin Ping, unlocking of hegemonic destruction, was unleashed. The absolute power of Sasaragi's one-shot, one-kill technique threatened to annihilate the entire group. But then, Koya activated Minus and created a protective barrier around everyone. The lock shattered as well. Ukibori was relieved that they had survived. He wondered if it was the brat's skill. The Calamity admitted that he had underestimated them. He flew into the sky as he prepared to leave. He shared that he would lie low for a while and wait for the day the gate fully opened. He introduced himself as Shiren and told them to look forward to his complete form. Koya refused to let him escape, so he chased after him. He demanded that Shiren give Sasaragi back. Inui was startled when Kuya unleashed a massive crimson hand of energy toward Shiren. Inui was in awe. The hand nearly reached Shiren. But just when Koya thought he had him, Shiren vanished. Koya was dumbfounded. He screamed at the top of his lungs. He fell into despair when Sasaragi was gone. At the Numbers Association, Inui greeted the numbers and thanked them for responding to his urgent summons. He announced that a special grade Calamity had appeared the previous day. He explained that the threat, Shiren, had stolen the body of number 9, Sasaragi, and escaped. At present, the Calamity's whereabouts were completely unknown. Inui admitted that they had completely mishandled their initial response to the threat and declared the situation a total defeat. Ukibori expressed frustration that the enemy always did the unexpected. Kijoin said he wished he had encountered the special grade Calamity himself, then asked Wanren what Shiren actually looked like. Seeing that Wanren was about to say gold, Kiritsu offered to answer instead. He explained that Shiren looked eerie and that just remembering him still sent chills down his spine. Kijoin dismissed his description as incredibly boring. Number 5, Kagurazaka Hikari, quickly scolded Jaime for being rude. Then she criticized Inui for recklessly engaging a special grade Calamity alone. Kurusu smiled and remarked that the public would likely call it a massive blunder, but questioned whether Inui truly intended to leave things as they were. Inui firmly stated that they would attack Shiren the moment he appeared again. He added that they would closely monitor the special grade gate. With only 6 days left before it opened, he was certain Shiren would make a move. Kiritsu asked how a Calamity could have appeared before the gate opened. Inui recalled that Shiren had said he would become whole once the gate opened. He explained that Shiren could separate his body and had likely been moving through detached body parts. He admitted that if Sasaragi were still alive, they could have locked the countdown, but that option was gone. Kijoin asked if Sasaragi was still alive. Inui explained that Sasaragi had been assigned to manage the special grade gate. Kiritsu added that Sasaragi's role was to lock dangerous gates and stop their countdowns, but the gate's countdown had resumed the previous day. Everyone was shocked. Inui concluded that Sasaragi's skill had been forcibly released. That meant they had to assume he was dead. The room fell silent. Kiritsu bitterly muttered that Sasaragi had been selfish until the very end. Everyone was saddened. Kurusu promised they would hold a proper memorial once the situation was over. He then pointed out a bigger problem. All the locked gates across Japan would now begin opening one after another. Inui confirmed it. Around 1,000 dangerous gates were now active threats. He knew that while the matter of Shirin was urgent, saving human lives took priority. He decided to assign each member to a specific gate so they could immediately respond to the appearing calamities. Kiritsu eagerly declared that he was ready to fight, while Ukabori quietly reflected on how hard Sasaragi had worked. Kurusu pointed out that the numbers had originally consisted of 10 members, but their ranks had decreased. He asked about Mitsumi's status. Inui explained that Mitsumi had been assigned elsewhere. He then shared some good news. A new number had been chosen after mastering refined armor release. He called the new member to come in. The newly appointed number 9 was Kei Kusanagi. Kiritsu warned him not to get carried away. Kei dismissed the warning and quietly vowed to surpass the older man soon. An excited Ukibori then brought up Kuya Kamikami and praised his incredible strength. He recalled how the numbers had been completely helpless until Kuya suddenly stepped in and saved everyone. Kiritsu acknowledged that Kuya possessed an impressive aura and the courage of a true fighter. Ukibori eagerly wondered if Kuya would also become a number and expressed his desire to fight alongside him again. Kei was offended, but he did not show it. Inui answered them and revealed that Kuya had already declined the offer. Meanwhile, a bull-like Calamity appeared behind Kuya. He raised his fist and prepared to strike. With a single punch, the Calamity's remains scattered everywhere. Mitsumi simply watched him. She counted that it was the 6th one. Kuya's gaze was sharp. He moved on to the next Calamity. Mitsumi stepped in front of him and asked what he was doing. He told her to move aside. He needed to get to the next gate. She warned him that hunting calamities without any rest after yesterday's events would kill him. Her words reminded her of a conversation with Inui. Inui had ordered her to stay beside Kuya for a while. She had protested because she wanted to hunt calamities instead. Inui explained that Kuya had lost his master and was emotionally unstable. He trusted her to understand that pain and asked her to watch over him. Back in the present, Mitsumi asked Kaoya why he had refused to join the numbers. She bluntly stated that if he had finished off Shiren earlier, Sasaragi might still be alive. She admitted that it could be true. Mitsumi listed all the meaningless what-ifs, and there would always be more of them. But she added that even if things had happened differently, none of it would change the reality that Sasaragi was dead. Kuya glared at her, and she glared right back. He attacked her, but she remained completely unfazed. Turns out, Kuya attacked a calamity behind her and destroyed it instantly. Then, our boy denied what she had said. He demanded to know whether anyone had actually seen Sasaragi die. He insisted that it was all just speculation. Mitsumi reminded him that Sasaragi's body had been taken over by a calamity. Kuya shouted back that he himself had survived the same thing. If he could endure it, then someone as strong as Sasaragi could too. He declared that he had to keep believing in him. Accepting a position among the numbers would mean accepting Sasaragi's death, so he refused. Mitsumi coldly pointed out that his reckless behavior would change nothing. He admitted that he had never realized how much Sasaragi had protected everyone by locking gates. Despite all his flaws, Sasaragi had carried a true sense of justice. With determination, Kuya vowed that he would not let Sasaragi's justice be wasted. He declared that he would continue defeating calamities so he could welcome Sasaragi back with pride. Mitsumi observed him. She questioned what was wrong with him. She poked him with a pointer stick and asked if he could even see himself clearly. He explained that patrolling the gates would force him to cover a wide area. He noted that because he had temporarily absorbed Sasaragi's power, he could sense his presence far more clearly than anyone else. Kuya made a promise that he would definitely find Shiren. Meanwhile, on the streets of Tokyo at night, inside Sky Tower, Shiren chuckled. With a wide grin, he admitted that humans were truly strong. Later that day, Mitsumi and Kuya stood before a gate with a timer showing just over 4 days remaining. At the headquarters of the Numbers Association, a report came in about unusual activity at Shiren's gate. Kurusu found it strange since the gate was not supposed to open yet. Inui confirmed that even though the countdown still had about 4 days remaining, Mitsumi and Koya had already been sent to investigate the anomaly. Kurusu noted that close observation was necessary. He added that nearly 300 targets had already been dealt with at the unlocked gates. Then, out of nowhere, Inui quietly wondered what Kurusu would do if a certain suspicion became an absolute certainty. And with that question, Inui had this dark aura around him. Something's not right. Back at the gate, Mitsumi and Koya waited cautiously. Mitsumi wondered what was about to come out. Koya proposed a theory based on Shiren's words that the entity would become whole once the gate fully opened. He reasoned that since the last encounter had only been an upper body, the lower half would likely appear this time. He was determined to stop Shiren from becoming whole. Mitsumi huffed. She told him to relax and warned that he would just get outsmarted again by Inui, Sasaragi, or someone else. She noted that people like them were surprisingly flexible. She then mentioned hearing that Inui had once saved Kuya and revealed that he had saved her too when she wanted to die. Mitsumi remembered being covered in blood while Inui held her and told her to become strong enough to overcome her past and her weakness. Back in the present, Mitsumi reflected on what it meant to fight for someone else. Koya was surprised to hear more about her past. She teased that Inui should get a haircut. Koya laughed in response. Mitsumi pointed out that it was probably the same feeling he had. Suddenly, an ominous, dark energy began to surge right in front of them. A pair of feet materialized from the gate. They braced themselves. Then Mitsumi froze. She recognized the figure and called out Nanami's name in disbelief. A young girl in a blue dress appeared and cheerfully greeted her. Kuya was confused and asked who she was talking to. Mitsumi was horrified as painful memories resurfaced. She remembered sitting on the swings with Nanami, who asked if Mitsumi had really refused an invitation from the numbers. Mitsumi admitted that she had done it to stay with her. She did not want them to be separated during a mission. Nanami happily thanked her. Mitsumi thought of her as her best friend. The memory shifted to Nanami, lying bloodied in Mitsumi's arms after a Calamity attack, and Mitsumi fell into despair. At present, Mitsumi broke down. Nanami said she wanted to see her because she had something she needed to say. Nanami accused her of being a liar, when they were supposed to be best friends forever. Then, Nanami transformed into a monstrous blue Calamity and screamed at Mitsumi for failing to protect her and leaving her to die. Nanami kept tormenting her with those words. Kuya realized that Mitsumi's trauma was being used against her. Elsewhere, Shiren watched through a floating eyeball and remarked that it was troublesome when they stood in front of the gate. But thanks to that, he had gained an unexpected reward, meaning he had discovered their weakness. He realized just how fragile humans were. Mitsumi broke down in tears as she failed to erase her past trauma, despite being told to become strong. She apologized to Inui for being just as weak as she had been all those years ago. The Calamity was about to devour her. Just as the monster closed in, Koya intercepted it with a powerful punch. It let out a loud cry of pain. Mitsumi stopped crying and looked at him. He asked what was so wrong about being weak and admitted that he used to hate his own weakness too. But he explained that accepting one's weakness and continuing to struggle was how a person truly became strong. He proclaimed that being weak was part of becoming strong. This helped Mitsumi regain her senses. Her consciousness broke free. Though she thought his logic sounded shallow, it still encouraged her. She regained her resolve and raised her weapon. She thanked Nanami and decided to become stronger. She pointed her weapon forward and declared with fierce determination that she would never lose anything important to her again. Golden energy surged around her as she activated her skill. Conductor. She used the refined armor release, Bloody Requiem. She conducted Symphony No. 9. The devastating force of the Kokyokyoku Daikuben blast tore through the battlefield, leaving Kuya completely stunned by its overwhelming power. Mitsumi laughed with excitement, thrilled that she had just unleashed the strongest attack of her life. Koya could only stare at the destruction in disbelief and mutter that her rumored firepower was completely ridiculous. Mitsumi snapped and scolded him for calling her stupid. Looking at him, Mitsumi remembered how she used to see him as nothing more than an introverted and gloomy loner. She then recalled Inui telling her that Kuya was believed to be humanity's hope. Mitsumi realized that maybe he was not so bad after all. At the tower, Shiren reeled in agony as he realized his other half had been completely erased. He immediately knew it was the work of that meddling brat, Kuya Kamikami. He decided to make Kuya his new favorite target. Meanwhile, Kuya received a call. He looked down at his phone and realized that Inui was calling him. Kuya ran up to a large memorial monument where Inui was already waiting and called out to him as he approached. Inui coldly acknowledged his arrival and mentioned that he had received the report about Shiren's other half being successfully destroyed. He admitted that Kuya's growth always managed to surprise him. Kuya quickly clarified that Mitsumi was the one who had actually defeated the enemy and pointed out that her firepower was unbelievable. Inui agreed and noted that Mitsumi had always possessed the greatest firepower among the numbers. Kuya felt that something about Inui seemed off. Inui revealed that this was the very place where a special grade disaster had descended 6 years ago. It was also where he had lost the person he loved and where he had saved Kuya. Kuya remembered that. With an intense gaze, Inui asked if the calamity sealed inside him was the very same special grade entity from 6 years ago. Kuya immediately sensed that Inui was different. He could feel the killing intent. Inui remembered the disaster from 6 years ago, and ever since then, he had been searching for that calamity, and now he sensed that the enemy was standing right in front of him. Back then, he had asked Kurusu what he would do in that situation. Kurusu thought about it. He admitted that despite his gentle appearance, he was short-tempered enough to impulsively confront and question a target. But he pointed out that Inui was different. He was humanity's role model. At present, Inui clarified that he held no personal grudge against Kuya, noting that he was the one who had originally allowed Kuya to coexist with a calamity. However, he warned that if that entity truly was the special grade disaster from 6 years ago, the situation would have to change. He had to take appropriate action for the sake of humanity. So, he asked him again whether the entity inside him was the special grade disaster from 6 years ago. Kuya realized that the fact Inui was asking meant he was already certain. He understood that his answer had to address not only the question, but also Inui's pain. He was about to reveal the truth about the calamity inside him, but he hesitated. Then his voice refused to come out. Mugen warned him that telling the truth would lead to his death. He had a choice to make, and Mugen warned that he would gladly take over his body and go on a rampage instead. Mugen asked if that was what he wanted. Kuya struggled against the suffocating pressure of Mugen's grip. Then he realized something. He had fought and grown with his two powers, Minus and Mugen's power. He was here to protect the world from disasters and to bring Sasaragi back. He apologized to Inui and answered that the disaster inside him was not the special grade disaster from 6 years ago. He also emphasized that it was now part of his power. He declared that his ultimate goal was to create a world free of calamities alongside Inui. To save Sasaragi, he expressed his absolute willingness to risk everything, including the power of the disaster and Minus. And for that, he needed the calamity's power. And he declared that once he fulfilled his role, he would give up that power, even if it cost him his life. Inui concluded that he was siding with the disaster. Kuya was confused and told him that was not what he meant. Suddenly, someone appeared and asked what they were talking about because everything sounded way too serious. That stunned Kuya, because the voice belonged to Sasaragi, and Sasaragi continued by saying that Kuya was hopeless, so he still needed him. Kuya sighed. He stated that this kind of line was not something Sasaragi would ever say. He knew it was Shiren. Shiren revealed his monstrous jaw when Kuya turned toward him. Then he activated Lock. Lightning crackled around Kuya. As he activated Minus, Shiren commented that even an SSR skill was not all powerful. So, this time he activated psychokinesis and levitated the surrounding debris. Kuya watched in shock. He was confused to see a completely different skill from Sasaragi's. He punched the debris flying toward him. Suddenly, Shiren activated a follow-up skill called Adhesion, catching him completely off guard. The controlled debris violently slammed into him. He was left completely immobilized beneath the crushing weight of the solid blocks. Kuya realized that while his Minus ability could nullify a disaster's energy and skills, it was useless against physical objects. Shiren proudly explained that he had stolen these powerful techniques from the people he had recently devoured. He added that he was greedy and wanted to experience all kinds of skills, and he was especially interested in the strongest human in the world, which was Inui. Kuya demanded to know how he knew about Inui. Shiren replied that a human body was full of information. Kuya realized that the enemy had somehow absorbed Sasaragi's knowledge. He panicked as he understood that Shiren had complete access to their information. He warned Inui to be careful. He shouted that the enemy could read minds, noting that Mitsumi had already fallen victim to a mental attack. Shiren leaned in close to Inui and mockingly listed the feelings of loss, emptiness, and loneliness that he could sense from him. He added that Inui had turned Kuya into a liar. Kuya watched in shock. Kuya tried to calm the situation by calling out to Shiren and frantically explaining that was not what he meant. Inui firmly told Kuya to stay quiet for a moment. Kuya grew anxious. Shiren sneered and noted that humanity was clearly not united. He never expected that someone among the numbers would side with a disaster in order to protect humanity. Kuya was visibly nervous. Inui remained silent. Shiren laughed loudly. Suddenly, Mitsumi leaped into the battle and unleashed a wave of energy, while scolding Inui for standing around like a log in front of a disaster. Mitsumi then turned her frustration toward Kuya and demanded to know why he was trapped like a human cocoon, leaving Kuya apologizing profusely. She firmly told them to get a grip. Inui stated that all Shiren could see was the surface layer of human emotion. He declared that the human heart was far deeper and more noble than that. He confidently told Shiren that a calamity at his level was no match for his plan. Shiren laughed maniacally and asked the others what they thought. Kuya, who was still bound, could only watch. Inui commented that Mitsumi was fast. She admitted that she had followed them because she expected Kuya to confess something important, but she freaked out when Sasaragi suddenly showed up. But she asked if that was Shiren using Sasaragi's form. Inui confirmed it and admitted that he was surprised to make contact that early. But since Shiren had already been driven back twice, they knew he could not afford to be picky. Mitsumi did not care and said she was itching to kill him. Shiren laughed at her and mocked her by bringing up how she had been bawling her eyes out because of his other half. He challenged her by saying he would make her experience even greater terror. Mitsumi pouted. She was almost pushed back by the pressure Shiren released. She scoffed and exclaimed that it was awesome to experience the pressure of a special-grade calamity. Inui warned that Shiren was not yet in his complete form and would only grow stronger. He told Mitsumi that they needed to stall him until reinforcements arrived. Shiren replied that they were welcome to invite everyone. He called them foolish for thinking they could stop him. Mitsumi grew even more annoyed. Kaoya wondered if they really thought they had a chance of winning. Shiren continued creating more limbs across his body. Inui warned Mitsumi that Shiren was using Sasaragi's lock and told her to watch his arm. Shiren tried to strike them with lock. Mitsumi activated Bloody Requiem and used Seal-Breaking Dispel. At the same time, Inui launched Death Parade. Shiren simply laughed at them. Then he was hit. Koya wondered if they had succeeded. Shiren remarked that he had already seen that technique before. But then he noticed something. Inui stepped forward and activated Judgment Sword Circular. A ring of glowing blades surrounded Shiren and tore his body apart. Inui completed his attack, but Shiren's severed body quickly regenerated through writhing tendrils. Shiren mocked him and said he was scary because just touching the sword felt like his body would be erased. He remarked that it seemed to be a skill that purged evil. He claimed that good and evil depended entirely on a person's judgment, and depending on how it was used, it could lean either way. Basically, it was a double-edged sword. He said that right to Inui's face. Mitsumi demanded to know what he meant. Shiren attacked her with lock. The chains tightly bound her in place. Inui severed Shiren's head. Inui stated that if cutting the torso was not enough, then he would simply cut off the head. While Shiren's head tried to reconnect, he taunted Inui by asking where he planned to cut him next. Inui slashed across his entire body, but to their surprise, Shiren was not taking any lasting damage. Mitsumi asked how they were supposed to defeat him. Shiren stated that the attacks actually hurt, and that it normally took time for him to regenerate. He then asked them if they really had time to keep stalling. Shiren revealed that he had been the one buying time all along. Suddenly, an overwhelming surge of pressure spread across the area. Koya instantly recognized the terrifying energy. He immediately guessed that another special-grade calamity had appeared. He wondered where it had shown up this time. Across the city, people stopped in their tracks. They grew anxious as a massive, ominous purple gate materialized directly above Sky Tower. Shiren smiled and said that everything was proceeding right on schedule. Shizuka rushed in and informed Inui that a special grade gate had just been confirmed in the skies above Sky Tower. Mitsumi asked Inui what they should do. He told her to calm down. He stated that the opening of a special grade gate normally took years, and that the numbers would use all their strength to defeat Shiren. He planned to respond calmly to the new gate. Mitsumi clicked her tongue when she saw that the bastard had fully regenerated. Koya noticed something strange happening to Shiren's arm. Shiren asked them if they were even curious why he rated lock as an SSR skill. Mitsumi yelled, no. Inui knew that while the skill was powerful, it was not actually essential to Shiren. Shiren then activated Intimidation Dispel Keyring. He used lock. He explained that it was a skill that governed keys, and if something could be locked, it could also be opened. His hand used a key to open the new gate. Inui was startled when he realized Shirin could do that. They finally understood how dangerous he truly was. Kuya refused to let him continue. Power surged through his body and he broke free. He charged at Shirin. Shirin chuckled. Bones suddenly emerged from his body, and the center of his torso transformed into a gate. It caught Koya, since Koya was being noisy. Shirin wanted him out of the way. Koya was swallowed into his body. Inui and Mitsumi were dumbfounded. After that, Shirin unlocked the gate. The gate shattered like glass. In disbelief, the public realized that another devastating calamity had appeared right after a special-grade threat had already emerged. The civilians questioned what the numbers were doing. A menacing, horned calamity descended from the sky. He muttered that everything had gone according to Shirin's plan. The crowd was too shocked to move. Suddenly, the calamity crashed violently into the ground. Everyone was terrified. The calamity laughed maniacally as the human stood frozen in fear, amused by the chaos. It was the first time he had ever seen a human. He immediately went on a rampage and slaughtered the humans beneath his immense weight. He looked over the destruction and rejoiced at the great feast before him. Opening his grotesque maw, he gleefully remarked that he would not even need to devour them all. Shirin's hand waved at him and called him Aizen. He expressed that he was happy to see him. Shirin told him to go wild. Aizen vowed to eat every single human. He warned Shirin to stop giving him orders. Then he ate Shirin's hand. The giant calamity complained that Shirin tasted terrible. He wanted to try something different. Humans ran for their lives. Inui and Mitsumi watched the chaos unfold through a screen. Shirin chuckled and pointed out that the situation had become terrible. He explained that the calamity, Aizen, had been sealed away for 100 years because of his extreme violence, making him an outcast even among calamities. He darkly joked that Aizen would thoroughly enjoy his first meal in a long time. Mitsumi and Inui glared at him. Shirin laughed maniacally and said it was fortunate that he had gathered all the numbers in one place. Now they finally understood his real plan. He admitted that dealing with all of them at once would have been too troublesome. By releasing Aizen, he had drawn the numbers away and successfully isolated Inui. Mitsumi expressed her disgust toward Shirin and confidently stated that Inui would never fall for a trick like that. Inui agreed with her. Activating a communication screen, he immediately contacted the other numbers and ordered everyone to head to Sky Tower at once to subdue the special-grade calamity. He urged Mitsumi to hurry, because innocent lives were at stake. She was confused. She asked what they would do about Shirin. Inui offered to hold him back alone. Mitsumi thought about it, and decided that they would defeat Shirin together before dealing with the Zen. She remarked that Inui always tried to handle everything by himself. She reminded him that Koya was still trapped inside Shirin, and said that the three of them could win if they fought together. Inui remarked that all of his juniors were equally stubborn. Aizen stood in the middle of the devastated city, and wondered if he had already devoured everything in the area. Frustrated, he muttered that the meal was nowhere near enough. Nearby, a terrified family hid beneath the rubble while their child cried. The father tried to calm the child, but to their surprise, Aizen loomed over them. Before he could attack, someone launched an attack at him. It was Kei. He aimed for Aizen's arm and unleashed a powerful strike. But the attack did nothing. He was shocked when he realized he could not even damage the calamity. Kiritsu immediately ordered Kei to get out of the way and unleashed his own attack, Assault, engulfing Aizen in dark energy. On Kiritsu's back, Ukabori explained that Kiritsu's special move possessed enough power to pulverize trucks, but the calamity emerged from the smoke completely unharmed. Ukabori grumbled and complained that their attacks were doing nothing. He asked if anyone had a move with more firepower. Kiritsu snapped at him for complaining while being carried around. Ukibori argued back that he was still just a child. The numbers gathered together in the ruined city and wondered if everyone had finally arrived. Hikari finally showed up and apologized for being late because she kept getting stopped by red lights. Kiritsu scolded her for obeying traffic laws during an emergency. Suddenly, someone warned Hikari to look behind her. Aizen loomed directly over her. A massive explosion erupted. Kiritsu and Ukibori watched in shock. Aizen admitted that the attack had actually hurt. Hikari stood a safe distance away. Energy crackled around her as she grumbled about being attacked without warning. She snapped that attacking from behind without a word was incredibly rude. Angered, she declared that Aizen would regret it. Aizen was delighted when he caught their scent. A grin spread across his face as he remarked that their scent was truly exquisite. Kaufya wondered if he was inside Shiren's body. He assumed that Shiren had eaten him. He cursed and said that unlocking the lock gate should not have been possible. He wondered if a new special grade disaster had already appeared. From where he was, he could not tell what was happening outside. He shouted for Shiren to let him out immediately. Suddenly, flesh wrapped around him. He was shocked. A calamity suddenly appeared before him and told him to listen carefully. It asked him to stay there quietly. The calamity had a talking hand, and it told him that it was about to turn the world upside down. Kuya grew anxious. He desperately thought that he had to get out of there. Meanwhile, Shiren chuckled. He faced Inui and Mitsumi. Mitsumi wondered what would happen to Sasaragi if they managed to kill the calamity. Inui answered that they would leave Kuya to Shizuka, as they needed to focus on Shiren, since Sasaragi's automatic door overhead was intelligent. Mitsumi unleashed attack song number 2, the Leica March. Shiren remarked that the diversity of humans was astonishing. She angrily told him to stop sticking to her because it was annoying. Inui attacked from behind, with Judgment Sword. Lightning crackled as he activated the technique X. This excited Shiren. He claimed that the scent of death lingered around them. His arm split into 3 vine-like tendrils, and they wrapped around Mitsumi. He pulled her toward him and challenged Inui to cut them. Mitsumi was stunned. Inui's gaze never wavered. Inui struck them. Shiren could not believe it, that he would attack his own comrade. But when he looked more closely, he realized that Mitsumi was completely unharmed. Inui explained that his attack only worked on those his soul recognized as evil. He entrusted the rest to Mitsumi. Mitsumi, now at point-blank range, planned to use a technique that would work on Shiren. She unleashed Death Barrel. Shiren fled for his life as flames rained down on him. Inui asked Shizuka what was happening with Kuya. Shizuka replied that she was trying to retrieve him, but it was extremely difficult to target a moving object. She asked them to give her a little more time. Kurusu decided to join the battle. Souls appeared around the area. Inui instantly knew it was his doing. He could not believe Kurusu was there when he had told him to deal with the other calamity. Shizuka did her best. Suddenly, she announced that they had received a communication from Kijoin. They wondered what it was and whether things had already been taken care of on the other side. Inui asked Kijoin what was wrong. Kijoin apologized for interrupting while he was busy. She informed them that the numbers had been wiped out. Kiritsu could not believe it. Ukibori asked how it was even possible. They had all suffered severe injuries. Kijoin admitted that they thought they could finish Azen with a single strike using Sekiran armor, but they had been outsmarted. Earlier, they all charged together, but as they did, they felt a strange sensation. A skill called Shock Inhale Dining was activated. The numbers were all shocked when the calamity was able to use intimidation. Their power was absorbed. Then it spoke as it was amused. This calamity became excited when it tasted something delicious. It described a profound flavor that struck him right in the gut and a richness he had never tasted before. He claimed it was the best thing he had ever tasted. The numbers were shocked that it had eaten the energy. Without their intimidation attack, they had no idea what they were supposed to do now. Ukibori mentioned that not even Inui could do that. Then, without letting anyone prepare, the calamity threw a punch. It was so powerful that it caused a massive explosion, and that single attack wiped out the numbers. They remained conscious, but their injuries were so severe that they could not move. Ukibori asked Kijoin if there was any way to defeat that monster. He thought she might know something since she was smart. She replied that he was asking for the impossible. She explained that now that their energy had been eaten, there was nothing they could do. Unless there was some dreamlike ability that could nullify the calamity's power. That made her suddenly sit upright. She thought of one person. They realized that with that ability, it might actually work. They agreed that Kamikami-kun's mitosis could nullify the creature's power. They were talking about Kouya's nullification ability. They all looked forward to seeing him. They believed that if it was Kouya, it might be possible. Kijoin finally understood what Inui had always meant when he said Kouya was the hope of humanity. This was exactly what he had been talking about. Kiritsu replied that if there was still hope, then there was still something they could do. Hikari declared that they might not have intimidation anymore, but they were still the numbers. Determined to stop the disaster, she declared that they would prevent any further damage by taking down the special grade calamity. They all got back on their feet and attacked. They planned to hold out until Kuya arrived. Meanwhile, Shizuka finally got a lock on Kuya. Inui instructed her to place a door in front of Kuya. He admitted that it would not be a pretty sight. That made her think he already knew where the exit was. She pushed her power to the limit until she started bleeding. She unleashed Guidance Door Beta. Back to this fight. The other numbers continued attacking the Calamity. Kei cursed. He muttered that Kuya was annoying. Everyone kept calling for him, yet he was taking forever. He shouted at the top of his lungs and told him to hurry up. Then he froze in shock. When Kuya stepped out of a door behind the Calamity, Kuya was taken aback. The Calamity was not Shiren, but he realized that this was the one. He punched it with all his might, sending the Calamity crashing face first into the ground. A few moments back, Kuya was screaming to be released. Suddenly a door appeared in front of him. He realized that Shizuka had opened a path for him. He noticed that this was not the same place as before, and he saw the new Calamity that had appeared. He didn't hesitate to punch it. He slammed it into the ground. The numbers were surprised by his arrival. Ukibori happily pointed toward the sky. He pointed out that Koya had arrived. Koya asked them if they were okay. He so focused on them that he didn't notice the Calamity behind him. The Calamity asked him what the heck he was. It was annoyed by the interruption because it had just started filling its stomach. It targeted him. But Koya was determined to make it eat his attack. He unleashed the intimidation of divine retribution. This made the Calamity grin. It inhaled deeply and absorbed the golden light. The numbers warned Koya that it could devour his intimidation, so he needed to be careful. That led Kuya to use his minus skill. The Calamity was confused. Without giving it time to react, Kuya activated the skill, Brass. Water like ropes wrapped around the Calamity. The Calamity panicked. It demanded to know what the skill was because it resembled Shiren's corrosion. Kuya revealed that he would be using its skill as well, which was Devour. The Calamity became furious, but before it could do anything, it noticed something. Kuya punched it, and the impact caused a massive explosion. Half of the monster's body was gone. The monster stood there in shock. It screamed as blood poured from its wounds. The numbers watched in amazement. But Kei noticed their reaction. He muttered that anyone could have done that. The Calamity became even more determined to kill them. Its body transformed. Its arms multiplied. Ukibori knew Koya could not handle that many. Koya made a hand sign. He activated Divide and created clones. His clones rushed toward the Calamity's many arms. They punched them all at once, again and again, and they dealt heavy damage. The Calamity realized the fight had become completely one-sided. It believed no human should possess such power. It strengthened its body and told Kuya not to think he could defeat it. Then it shot into the sky. It took a deep breath, causing its stomach to swell like a balloon. They watched in surprise as it grew larger and larger. Then it let out a deafening roar and created a giant mass of energy. The attack came crashing down toward Kuya. The shockwave from the roar made Kuya's minus useless. He was shocked when something suddenly pulled him away. That move saved him from being crushed. He quickly realized it was Kei's compression ability. He called out to Kei and thanked him for saving his life. Kei reminded him not to let his guard down. He refused to let Koya take all the credit. Koya simply smiled. He told Kei they should defeat the Calamity quickly and hurry to Inui's side. Kei called him arrogant and told him not to order him around since he was not part of the numbers. Meanwhile, Shizuka watched everything through the screen. Inui learned that Kuya escaped safely thanks to her help. Mitsumi praised Kuya for his excellent skills. Inui told them that the special grade Calamity had no moves left. Shiren simply laughed. Inui told Mitsumi to leave the Calamity to him. She agreed since they no longer had a role to play. Several tentacles burst from Shiren's body. Inui told Shiren that his sense of justice was extremely vague. It could easily waver. But that was fine because he never expected Shiren to represent humanity's justice. It was enough for him to enforce his own justice. In other words, his skill, Judgment, existed for that exact purpose. He activated his intimidation armor, Divine Punishment, and Execution. Shiren was placed on a cross as Inui activated Absolute Judgment Kill. Shiren panicked when he realized he could not move. Inui explained that Absolute Judgment Kill was a technique that unfailingly and fatally destroyed evil. Shiren remained bound to the cross. As the judgment began, he knew things were getting dangerous. Then he mentioned the name Kuro Kyoko. That name made Inui glare at him. I swear this villain has more plot armor than our MC. Then Inui demanded to know why Shiren mentioned that name. Shiren chuckled. Then he asked if Inui wanted Kyoko back. Just a little flashback. Some time ago, Inui stood in front of a dog statue and people crowded around him as they recognized him as the new member of the Numbers. They admired how cool he looked. Others questioned what exactly he was doing there. A short-haired woman on a motorcycle parked behind him and said that he was unable to view himself objectively. She pointed out that someone like him should not be standing in broad daylight in front of the public. She casually greeted him with a cheerful hello and apologized for making him wait. People excitedly pointed out that it was Kyoko-san, the lone female member of the Numbers. They admired how cool she looked riding the bike and thought she was incredibly cute. She asked Inui if they should get going. It made people wonder if the two of them were dating, but even so, the public thought they looked cute together. She asked him if he was enjoying himself. She encouraged him to feel the wind. He felt the wind as his hair brushed against his face. He admitted that he simply did not know how to enjoy it. She admitted that it was good for him to be honest. However, she explained that going along with the mood was also part of being a proper adult. Suddenly, some calamities jumped out onto their path. They were surprised to find them hiding in a mountain that deep. Those calamities ended up dead, and Inui was being healed. Kyoko did that for him. She warned him that it was dangerous for a warrior of his caliber to let down his guard. Then she asked if the wound he had gotten still hurt. He thought that perhaps he had become complacent because she was there to heal his wounds. She softly laughed and remarked that he had changed. He asked if she really thought so. Deep inside, he thought that Kyoko was actually the one who had changed him. They parked the motorcycle, and as they sat atop a bone overlooking the whole city, she expressed that she loved the place. She could not see that scenery before the calamities appeared. Calamities had ruined the world, but even in a world like that, she could still see the good things. Inui remarked that she was saying words that he wished to understand, because to him, a calamity was nothing more than an object of extermination. However, he admitted that it was precisely because she possessed a world view completely different from his own that he had been drawn to her so strongly. He wanted to say something about the day when they managed to erase calamities from the world, but she stopped him. Because she was a woman who lived in the present, she did not make promises about an unknown future because that was her principle. However, she admitted that she did not want to forget that moment, so she suggested taking a picture. They took a selfie. Inui kept that photo as he longed for her. In the present, Shiren was tempting him. This villain asked Inui if he didn't want Kyoko back in his life, because Shiren was aware. That was Inui's reason for fighting. Mitsumi asked who she was, and Kurusu explained that she was Inui's girlfriend, but she died during the attack of the special grade calamity 6 years ago. Mitsumi had suspected as much. She then questioned what Shiren meant by bringing her back. Shocked, she asked if he was talking about bringing her back to life. But she knew there was no way anyone could do something like that. She knew it was nothing more than a petty attempt to buy time. She shouted for Inui to hurry up and finish him off. Shiren admitted that even he could not bring a dead person back to life. But he knew Kyoko was special. Inui wondered if he had learned that from Sasaragi's memories. He questioned how much Shiren actually knew and what exactly he meant. Shiren teased him by saying he would leave that to his imagination. Inui asked if it was true that he could really bring Kyoko back. Shiren assured him that he could. Mitsumi grew worried for Inui. Inui came to his senses and apologized. He assured the two of them that everything would be all right, because his justice would never waver. He attacked and blood sprayed through the air. Meanwhile, Kei and Koya continued fighting the other calamity. They attacked at the same time. The calamity counterattacked with Press Meteor. Koya saw his clones get wiped out. It was too late when he noticed the attack heading toward him. He was shocked when someone suddenly pulled him away. He thanked Kei for saving him. Kei complained that Kuya was a pain to look after. He could not use intimidation because Kuya had drained him earlier. He really wanted to show Kuya his intimidation, but he had no choice except to focus on supporting him. He reminded Kuya to be grateful. Of course, Kuya thanked him again. Then, Kuya's arm grew larger. Shiren's tentacles and the power he had stolen from Aizen flowed into his arm. He tried to punch the calamity. The Numbers were surprised when they saw that the calamity could block the attack. The calamity warned the little human not to get cocky. It declared that no matter how strong humans became, the world would eventually belong to the calamities. It swore that it would crush him there and devour him completely. And it laughed at humanity's fate. Koya told it to shut up. He declared that no matter how insignificant they might seem, every human was still struggling desperately to live. And he would not let this calamity do whatever it wanted. He was determined to protect the world. The Numbers watched in awe. Kei assumed a combat stance, and activated shrine compression. The Calamity called him an idiot because that technique would not work on it, but Kay revealed that it was not aimed at the Calamity, and the actual target was space itself. By compressing space, it would shrink and be pulled into a single point. The Calamity was surprised when it was dragged forward. Kuya looked proud of Kay. He was grateful. Now that the monster had been pulled down to the ground, he continued his charge. He realized that this still was not enough. He needed more power to defeat the Calamity completely and without fail. And so, he activated his skill and multiplied the power exponentially. The Calamity watched him approach. The punch was so powerful that shockwaves shot into the sky. The numbers watched in shock. When the smoke and debris settled, it revealed Kuya standing beside the defeated Calamity. But upon closer inspection, only its head remained. Its body had been reduced to ashes. They were amazed that Kuya had brought it down, but they wondered if he was okay. After a brief pause, Kuya suggested that they should head to Inui's side. Speaking of Inui, at that moment, blood stained Inui's cheek, and he simply wiped it away with a finger while wearing a serious expression. A door appeared. The portal opened. Blinding light burst from it. Kuya rushed out with the others. He called out to Inui-san and reported that the Azan subjugation had been completed. He declared that he was ready to join the Shirin subjugation, but he stopped mid-sentence as shock washed over him. Because he saw Inui standing with his sword in front of Kurusu, who had fallen to the ground. And it looked like the man was dead. Our boy asked what was happening. Then Mitsumi screamed at Inui and demanded to know what he meant. She was confused because Shiren was supposed to be their enemy, yet Inui was standing on his side. Shiren pointed out how confused she seemed. He had already decided not to bother explaining it to her. Inui replied that there was nothing more to say to the dying. That made her furious. She realized that he had betrayed them. She charged at him. But he simply stepped aside and avoided her attack. Then he slashed her neck. Blood sprayed everywhere. Shizuka, Kei, and Koya watched it happen. Koya was dumbfounded. He rushed toward Mitsumi while demanding to know what Inui was doing. But Inui attacked them. He moved swiftly, and with a single slash, he cut down Kei and Shizuka. Fortunately, Koya nullified the attack with his ability. Koya called out to Kei and Shizuka. Looking back at Inui, he realized that he had betrayed them. Meanwhile, Shiren chuckled. That caught Koya's attention, and he blamed him. He demanded to know what Shiren had done to Inui. He charged toward him. Shiren scoffed. Inui stepped in front of Shiren and shielded him, which completely shocked Koya. Inui told Koya that it was not as if he had been deceived by someone like Shiren, so he told him to stop ridiculing him. He declared that everything had happened by his own choice. Koya demanded to know why. When everyone there was an important comrade of the numbers, the people who protected humanity. Kuya could not understand Inui's actions, especially when he was the one who saved him. He had also believed in him and raised him. He questioned whether all of that had been a lie. Inui patted his head, looked into his eyes, and told him that it was not a lie. He assured him that his words had been sincere and that every feeling he had shown him was genuine. However, he admitted that at that moment, the value of fulfilling his one wish had surpassed the importance of humanity, overcoming the calamities. He concluded that was all there was to it. Kuya, already holding back tears, still could not understand him. So, Inui pointed out that whoever stood in his way, no matter who they were, would become his enemy. He warned Kuya that if he valued his life, he should never get involved with him again. Kuya shed tears as he continued to insist that he could not understand. He stepped in front of Inui and told him to stop. He could not let him go, not when he still did not understand him. Inui unleashed his full power and donned his white armor. He pointed out that Koya's body was already battered, and he doubted that Koya was strong enough to stop him. Inui activated Judgment Sword, while our MC used his Infinite Awakening. Koya knew that during the fight against Azen, his right arm had already become useless. But he refused to waste time crying about it. He forced his body to move using the power of infinity. He formed a hand sign, and his arm grew larger. He was determined to stop Inui. Inui commented that the condition of that arm truly resembled a calamity's curse. Koya was dumbfounded when his arm was severed in the blink of an eye. He screamed loudly as blood gushed out. Inui simply watched him. Then he activated the Sword of Justice. Golden swords danced through the air and rained down on Koya like a meteor shower. Kuya was in serious danger. Fortunately, he was agile enough to evade hundreds of swords, but the swords kept coming, and he knew he would not be able to dodge all of them. After the consecutive battles against Azen and Shiren, Inui knew that Kuya had reached his limit. in terms of both skill and stamina. Kuya noticed that Minus and Infinite Awakening were beginning to fade. Basically, his powers were running out. Inui bid him farewell. He raised his sword and prepared to strike Kuya down. Kuya could only watch. Unexpectedly, several chains wrapped around Inui, and Kuya recognized them. This was Lock, one of Sasaragi's skills. Inui asked Shiren what he was doing. Shiren did not answer at first, then he yelled that it was not him, because it felt like his body was moving on its own. Suddenly, Sasaragi spoke. Seeing Koya's face, he commented that Koya was still a crybaby. Kuya realized that this was not Shiren. Sasaragi complained that they had made such a racket next to someone who was sleeping that he woke up. Because of that, he figured he might as well get up. When Koya realized that it was really Sasaragi speaking, he cried. Sasaragi acknowledged that Kuya had grown stronger, but Kuya continued to sob. Sasaragi realized that he could not hold on to consciousness much longer. He called out to Inui and warned him that if he laid a hand on the kid, he would lock his life away. After that, Sasaragi faded. Shiren was back. He commented that Sasaragi was incredibly persistent. Inui said nothing. He removed his armor and walked away. Shiren asked if they were done already. Inui answered that he did not want to be killed by Sasaragi. Shiren whispered that Kyoko's enemy was right there, but he accepted Inui's decision since Kuya would still be useful. Shiren extended his hand and told Inui that they should go. Kuya's eyes widened when he saw him open the gate, but Shiren was not done yet. He also activated Key Lock. He told Inui to look, because beyond that gate was the world of calamities. Koya was stunned. He could not believe that Inui would seriously cross over to that side. Unexpectedly, several helicopters flew overhead. Shiren commented that the reaction was growing stronger. A reporter was on one of the helicopters, and he reported that a truly shocking situation was unfolding right before his eyes. Members Inui, Kurusu, and Mitsumi had all been caught in the incident. Their current conditions were unknown, but a massive amount of blood could be seen around them. He added that the person accompanying Inui appeared to be Sasaragi. However, he quickly corrected himself after realizing that it was actually the special-grade Calamity Shiren who had recently stolen Sasaragi's body. Suddenly, Shiren moved. He showed himself to the camera while dangling upside down. He greeted humanity and introduced himself as Shiren. He then announced that he had become friends with humanity's hero, Inui Seika. He shared that they had received an oath stating that humanity would cooperate with the Calamity's ambition. People watching the broadcast were left confused and questioned what they were seeing. Shiren remarked that this must be terrible news for humanity. He then revealed that thanks to the unlock they had received from Sasaragi, they could now freely travel between their world and the human world. The numbers who were watching were shocked. He announced that the next time they came, he would bring many more of his friends, so humanity should look forward to it. He told them that they would meet again, with despair. Then he returned to Inui's side and thanked him for waiting. Inui asked if he was satisfied. Shiren replied that it had all been nothing more than a little mischief. However, he warned Inui that there would be no turning back now. Inui corrected him and stated that Shiren was the one who had made sure he could no longer turn back. He stated that he did not mind because he had absolutely no intention of backing down now, but he also clarified that it did not mean they had become comrades. He coldly warned that if the promise about bringing Kyoko back turned out to be a lie, he would kill him. Shiren chuckled. He claimed that calamities were honest, far more honest than humans. Meanwhile, Kuya weakly called out to Inui. He begged him not to go. He questioned who would protect the world if he disappeared. He reminded him that they were supposed to create a world without calamities in the first place. He told him that the world needed him. Inui simply continued walking away. And eventually, the gate closed. Despair was clear on Koya's face. He sobbed as he called out Inui's name. For this fight, sadly, the numbers and humanity itself clearly lost. They were not just strong enough to withstand Shiren's plot armor and Inui's betrayal. Alright, that's it for today's story. If you want the weekly chapter updates for this series, those will now be uploaded on my second channel, Manhwa Updater. So if you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure to check it out and join the update gang. Thanks for watching, stay cool, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.